Hiraku Machio wakes up in a rustic log cabin and realizes he just had a dream about his past life in a hospital. A black-haired maid checks on him and apologizes for not having breakfast ready yet. Hiraku tells her it is fine and mentions he just woke up early. Another maid with a single white horn enters the room. Hiraku kindly asks her to stop calling him master. She agrees and decides to call him village chief instead. He walks into the kitchen and spots a red slime creature in a clay pot. The horned maid offers to burn the slime with magic. Hiraku quickly tells her to spare the creature. He steps outside his cabin and stretches his arms. An elf girl with long white hair greets him and asks if he is up early. Hiraku confirms he just woke up. A blonde angel girl flies down and mentions she was just doing her rounds. Hiraku asks if there is any trouble. She assures him everything is fine but mentions some reports. Hiraku thinks back to the dream he had. He tells the girls that he experienced a memory from his past. He looks around the village and sees beastkin children playing together. He watches an elf girl hand an apple to a beastkin girl planting sapling. He sees himself helping out by carrying heavy logs. He watches the farm animals and the villagers working together. He reflects on how his past self could never have imagined living such a peaceful and comfortable life. He remembers the exact moment he transitioned into this world. Back then, Hiraku finds himself standing in a dark cosmic void confronting a divine man with long blonde hair. The man introduces himself as the god who governs the world. Hiraku realizes he is dead. God confirms his death and mentions that Hiraku lived a short life filled with extreme hardships. Hiraku suffered from betrayals and eventually collapsed from a terminal illness. God admits that Hiraku's miserable life was partly due to a mistake on God's end. God offers to reincarnate Hiraku with a perfectly healthy body as a form of atonement. Hiraku accepts the offer. God asks if Hiraku has any specific requests for his new life. Hiraku thinks about his time stuck in the hospital bed watching shows about farming. He explains that he was never a sociable person in his previous life. He asks God if he can live a quiet life doing agriculture in a place far away from civilization. God notes that agriculture falls under a different deity's jurisdiction but promises to work it out. God grants Hiraku a new healthy body and bestows him with a special power called the omnipotent farming tool. God tells Hiraku to enjoy his second life and sends him away. Hiraku wakes up on the rocky ground of a dense forest. He slowly sits up and examines his hand. He realizes he can move freely without any pain. He celebrates having a healthy body after spending so much time bedridden. He decides to start his new farming life right away. He looks around and notices he is surrounded by massive trees. He realizes he is extremely far away from any form of civilization. He checks his clothes and notes he looks like a standard village NPC. He tries to figure out how to survive. He remembers the omnipotent farming tool. He focuses his mind and summons the tool. He summons a golden magic hoe into his hands. He tests it by striking the ground. The hoe effortlessly plows through the hard dirt and tree roots. He notices the soil becomes incredibly soft and fluffy. He also realizes he does not feel tired at all despite swinging the tool. He plans to grow vegetables but knows he needs to secure water and food first. He explores the surrounding area but only hears the wind in the leaves. He cannot find any rivers or edible plants. He worries about running into dangerous monsters. He decides to find a safe place to set up a base. He spots a colossal ancient tree towering above the rest of the forest. He chooses the giant tree as his landmark and base of operations. He decides to dig a well since he cannot find surface water. He uses his farming tool to create wooden dowsing stick. He tries to locate underground water but struggles to understand how the dowsing actually works. He changes his strategy and transforms the tool into a glowing yellow shovel. He realizes the tool can change into any farming implement he imagines. He cannot create complex machinery like an excavator. He sticks to basic tools and starts digging a massive hole near the giant tree. He digs deep into the earth without feeling any fatigue. He soon realizes he dug straight down and cannot climb back out. He uses the shovel to dig a diagonal tunnel up to the surface. His shovel strikes something hard and water bursts out of the ground. He successfully secures a fresh water source on his first try. He drinks the water and feels grateful to God. He climbs out of the hole and prepares to look for food. He realizes he is still not hungry. He decides to use his energy to clear the land for his farm. He transforms the tool into a scythe and cuts away the brush. He decides the giant tree is in the way of his future fields. He changes the tool into a large white axe. He strikes the massive tree trunk. The entire tree gets chopped down in a single magical swing. He gets caught in the massive dust cloud and marvels at the tool's sheer power. He transforms the tool into a hatchet to process the fallen tree. He effortlessly strips the branches and peels the thick bark. He changes the tool into a hook to drag the heavy logs around. He successfully creates a neat stack of processed timber. He wants to build a proper log cabin but realizes he lacks nails and construction experience. He struggles to piece the walls together. He notices the sun is setting. He panics because he needs a light source for the night. He tries to summon a lighter or a match with his tool. The tool fails to transform. He guesses creating fire might violate the jurisdiction rules God mentioned. He also worries about losing the tool if it turns into a tiny disposable match. He thinks of a way to generate heat naturally. He transforms the tool into a magnifying glass. He feels relieved knowing he can start a fire when the sun comes back up. He spends his first night hiding inside a small hole he carved into the massive tree trunk. He drinks water from a wooden cup he made with a chisel. He realizes he can see perfectly in the dark. He attributes his night vision to his new healthy body or the light from the 2 moons shining in the sky. The sight of the alien moons completely solidifies the fact that he is in another world. The sun rises the next morning. Hiraku uses the magnifying glass to focus the sunlight onto some wood shaving. He successfully starts a small campfire. He spends the next few days clearing more land around his base. He uses a pickaxe to break rocks and level the ground. The constant work finally makes him hungry. He decides to explore further to find food. He swings his tool to clear some bushes and accidentally unleashes a massive shockwave. A giant gray rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs jumps out of the brush. The rabbit charges straight at him. Hiraku panics and swings his tool wildly. He accidentally strikes the rabbit in the neck with the scythe and kills it instantly. He processes the rabbit meat using a knife formed from his tool. He roasts the meat over his campfire. He eats the grilled rabbit and finds it tastes earthy and bloody. He accepts the meal gratefully since it keeps him alive. He decides to build a wooden toilet next. He builds a seat over a deep hole and adds an underground tank and a ventilation pipe to manage the smell. He finishes the toilet and feels a sense of accomplishment for maintaining his civilized habit. He tries to build a larger shelter using his new woodworking skills. He successfully constructs a small wooden outhouse to serve as his temporary home. He moves on to farming. He uses a silver-headed hoe to till a large rectangular field. He wonders what kind of crops he should grow. He thinks about potatoes, tomatoes, and corn. He quickly realizes he does not have any seeds to plant. He feels defeated and assumes he will have to forage for wild plants in the forest. He goes to sleep. He wakes up the next morning and checks the field. He is completely shocked to see vibrant green sprouts growing out of the tilled dirt. He realizes the plants grew overnight without any seeds. He assumes this is a special feature of the omnipotent farming tool, or just how this world works. He notices different types of sprouts growing in the rows. He spots something that looks like a green onion. He decides to protect his mysterious crops from wild animals. He uses his pickaxe to gather more wood and builds a sturdy wooden fence around the field. He digs a deep trench on the outside of the fence for extra protection. A few days pass. He defends his farm by killing several more giant rabbits that try to invade. He cooks and eats the rabbits to survive. He wonders why the monsters are so aggressive toward him. He uses a watering can created from his tool to water the sprouts. The magical water makes the plants grow incredibly fast. He hopes the crops are edible vegetables and not just decorative flowers. He spends his free time constructing a proper log cabin. He digs a shallow pit in the ground to increase the ceiling height. He stacks the notched logs and builds a sturdy roof out of tree bark and wooden pegs. He finishes the cabin and feels proud of his work. He sits inside and enjoys his new comfortable living space. He watches his crops bloom with white flowers and feels highly motivated to keep working. One afternoon, he walks near the edge of his fence and spots 2 massive black wolves. The wolves have glowing red eyes and white fur accents. He notices they are covered in scars and wounds. They do not act aggressively toward him. He places a wooden plank over the trench and invites them inside. He feeds them raw meat from a giant boar he killed earlier. The wolves eagerly eat the meat. He notices the female wolf has a swollen belly. He realizes she is pregnant and about to give birth. The female wolf suddenly collapses and goes into labor right in the dirt. Hiraku panics and does not know what to do. He carries both wolves inside his newly built log cabin to keep them safe. He sets up a small campfire near the entrance to provide warmth. He gives them space and decides to spend the night outside in a nearby cave. He worries that his presence might stress the mother, or that another monster might attack them. He accidentally falls asleep against the cave wall. He wakes up the next morning and rushes back to the cabin. He peeks inside and sees the mother wolf resting peaceful. He spots 4 tiny black wolf pups nursing on the dirt floor. He feels relieved that the delivery went smoothly. He cuts the best pieces of leftover boar meat and feeds the adult wolves to celebrate. He assumes the wolves will leave once they recover. The wolves show no signs of leaving and make themselves at home. Hiraku decides to let them keep the log cabin. He builds a second, larger cabin for himself right next to it. The wolf pups grow quickly and start running around the farm. The crops finally mature and are ready for harvest. Hiraku uses gardening shears to pick bright red tomatoes off the vine. He tastes one and confirms it is a delicious tomato. He tosses a tomato to the adult wolves. The wolves happily eat the vegetable. Hiraku feels thrilled that they enjoy his crops. He decides to grow even more delicious food for them. The wolves help out by hunting wild game and patrolling the perimeter of the farm. Hiraku names the male wolf Kuro and the female wolf Yuki. He names the 4 pups Kuroichi, Kuro-san, and Kuroyon. He realizes his farm is producing a massive harvest. He decides he needs to build a dedicated storage hut to hold all the food. He also plans to make proper furniture and more tools. He smiles and looks forward to continuing his slow and peaceful farming life in this new world. God observes Hiraku from his cosmic void and wonders how he is doing. God realizes he made a massive mistake by giving Hiraku such a miserable past life and then accidentally dropping him into the forest of death, a place swarming with highly dangerous monsters. God told him to just farm to survive, but now he panics and wants to call him back to safety. However, God remembers that interfering after someone reincarnates breaks his own rules. He simply hopes Hiraku will forgive him if his soul ever returns to the void. Meanwhile, Hiraku tests out his almighty farming tool some more and figures out the exact mechanics of how he grows crops without planting any seeds. He realizes that if he simply pictures a specific vegetable in his mind while tilling the soil, the magic tool automatically sows the seeds for that exact plant. He tests this theory by thinking about bean sprouts while hoeing the dirt so he can identify them immediately. And soon enough, actual bean sprouts start growing out of the ground. He decides to let them grow into full soybeans for future use. He also notices that the crops he plants with his magic tool grow at an incredibly fast rate. Sometimes they grow so fast that it actually startles him. He checks his potatoes and sees that the ones exposed to the sun have turned green. Remembering from his past life that green potato sprouts are poisonous, he decides it is way too risky to eat them. To fix this issue for future harvests, he starts building small mounds of dirt around the bases of the potato plants to keep them shielded from the sunlight. He realizes that ancient farmers probably learned all these tricks through trial and error, so he resolves to press on and learn from his own mistakes as he goes. Recognizing that his survival is entirely due to the gods, Hiraku carves 2 wooden statues and places them in a small shrine. He makes one for the god of agriculture and one for the creator god who gave him his new life, thanking them for his amazing progress and feeling like his home is getting more civilized. Later, he cooks up a simple lunch. He makes a stew using rabbit meat and his fresh, pesticide-free vegetables. He just boils everything in a pot since he has no seasonings at all to work with. He notes that the meat tastes a lot better and is much easier to eat because he properly drained the blood from the animals right after killing them. The wolves also prefer the properly bled meat, and Hiraku worries he might be spoiling them too much with good food. Still, he is glad they enjoy the meals, though he constantly wishes he had some salt to give the food some actual flavor. Hiraku decides to expand his agricultural efforts and plants a large orchard. He envisions apples, pears, and persimmons while tilling the earth. He knows that fruit trees usually take several years to bear anything edible, so he prepares himself to be very patient. He hopes that eventually, the fruit will vastly improve his daily diet. Living with his wolf companions brings him a massive amount of joy. He pets them and praises them, realizing that without their company, the crushing loneliness of the forest would be completely unbearable for him. He notices they have small horns on their heads, which reminds him he is in a magical world where even regular dogs have horns. The wolves are very well behaved and patiently wait in line for their turns to eat out of their wooden bowls. They also serve a crucial purpose by acting as his guides. Thanks to the wolves' keen senses, Hiraku can safely explore deep into the dense woods without any fear of getting lost. During one of these expeditions, he discovers a river with a small waterfall located about 30 minutes away from his base. He figures he can use this as a permanent water source if he digs a canal all the way back to his farm. Knowing this will be a massive long-term excavation project, he starts by building a wooden toilet right at the construction site, so he doesn't have to walk all the way home when nature calls. To speed up the digging process, he transforms his almighty farming tool into a wheelbarrow. Since the magic tool prevents him from ever getting physically tired, he puts Kuro in the wheelbarrow and pushes him at extremely high speeds through the forest. This completely backfires when he loses control, and they both tumble off a steep cliff. They survive the fall without serious injuries, but Hiraku quickly realizes he needs to focus on paving proper roads before trying to use a wheelbarrow ever again. Back at his main camp, he clears more trees and creates brand new fields. He grows rapeseed so he can eventually extract cooking oil from its seeds. He also plants wheat to make flour for bread and sugarcane to satisfy his craving for something sweet. He checks on his bean sprouts and sees they have fully matured into soybean. He really wants to boil them into edamame, but without any salt, he knows it won't taste right at all. He starts wondering if there are any rock salt deposits nearby. Soon the weather turns cold and Hiraku spots snow gathering on the distant mountain peaks. He realizes winter is fast approaching and he needs to prepare immediately. He tries to make warm clothing out of the giant rabbit pelts he collected, but they smell terrible and he fears they will rot, so he scraps that idea entirely. He figures his only option is to stockpile firewood and food, then hunker down inside his cabin next to the fire for the entire season. One day, a massive dark blue spider with white stripes and glowing red eyes wanders into his camp. At first, Hiraku is completely terrified, thinking a giant monster is attacking him. However, the spider offers him a piece of extremely high-quality white cloth with a red border that she wove herself. Hiraku thanks the spider and realizes she is totally friendly. He names her Zabuton because she looks exactly like a giant seat cushion. Zabuton moves into the canopy of the massive tree in the center of his farm and quickly develops a love for his potatoes. She takes the foul-smelling rabbit pelts that Hiraku had given up on and somehow tailors them into a beautifully crafted, fur-lined green winter coat. With this coat, Hiraku knows he can survive the freezing temperatures. Zabuton also makes bedding stuffed with leaves and curtains for his windows, drastically improving his standard of living and making the cabin feel like a real home. Winter finally hits hard, burying the entire forest in thick snow. Hiraku stays inside his cozy, dimly lit cabin with a crackling fire. The wolves stay indoors with him, while Zabuton apparently hibernates up in her massive tree. Even though he has plenty of stored food and a warm coat, Hiraku begins to suffer from severe cabin fever. He eats his plain baked potatoes and continues to wish for salt. More than anything, the sheer isolation gets to him. He realizes he hasn't spoken to another person in months and genuinely fears he might forget how to talk altogether. His anxieties peak when the heavy snow causes the roof of his cabin to cave in entirely, though he manages to survive the incident unharmed. The cold eventually subsides, the snow melts away, and spring arrives. Hiraku goes back to cooking vegetable stew outside in the sunlight. He notices the 4 wolf pups acting restless. They leave the farm and venture deep into the forest to find partner. A few days later, they all return, bringing new mates back with them to the farm. Shortly after, Zabuton climbs down from her tree accompanied by a massive swarm of tiny baby spiders. Hiraku realizes Zabuton is actually a female. Seeing both the wolves and the spiders expanding their families makes Hiraku feel incredibly jealous, but he is happy for them regardless. However, a larger population means more mouths to feed, so he immediately gets to work tilling new fields and planting more crops to sustain everyone. While he is busy farming, Zabuton suddenly starts frantically beating a wooden board with a mallet. Hiraku realizes she is ringing an alarm to warn him of incoming danger. Kuro runs up and quickly leads Hiraku deep into the woods. When they arrive at the scene, Hiraku is shocked to find a young, white-haired elf girl bound tight in Zabuton's thick spider webs, surrounded by his snarling wolf pack. The girl cries out for help. Overjoyed simply to hear another person's voice after so long, Hiraku immediately tries to call off the wolves. Suddenly, the girl breaks free, lunges at Hiraku, and violently bites into his neck. She sucks his blood, causing a massive magical glow to erupt around her. Hiraku feels absolutely no pain or fatigue from the blood loss, assuming his God-given healthy body is protecting him from harm. The girl's body rapidly transforms from a small child into a mature young woman. The girl thanks him for saving her and introduces herself as Lulu Lucy, a vampire. Hiraku asks if she is an enemy. Lu panics and explains that she only attacked him because his vicious dogs cornered her first, and she desperately needed blood to heal her wounds. Hiraku figures she seems harmless and listens to her story. Lu explains that they encountered each other by complete coincidence. She was severely beaten by the wolves and had to shrink into a child form to conserve her remaining energy. Realizing that his wolves technically started the fight, Hiraku feels guilty and tells her she can drink as much of his blood as she needs. Lu is absolutely amazed by the vitality and life force in his blood, noting she has never tasted anything so healthy in her entire life. Worried he might die from blood loss, Lu stops drinking and asks him to show her around his home. Hiraku takes her back to his farm. Lu is utterly stunned to find a flourishing agricultural settlement hidden in the middle of the deadly forest of death. She marvels at his massive cornstalks and asks about the red fruit growing on the vines. Hiraku explains they are tomatoes and uses his magic tool to manifest a pair of scissors to cut one off for her to try. Lu bites into the fresh tomato and is blown away by how juicy and delicious it is. She eagerly asks to see the rest of his crops. Hiraku happily shows off his radishes, corn, and other vegetables, feeling incredibly proud to finally have someone appreciate all his hard work. Night falls and they head inside his cabin. Lu uses a magical holographic display to catalog all the new plant species she saw. She explains that she is actually a magic researcher studying medicinal plants. She got into a massive dispute with some corrupt nobles who tried to steal her research, so she fled to the forest of death to hide from their assassins and continue her work in peace. She mentions how dangerous the forest's reputation is and expresses shock that Hiraku managed to tame the region's deadliest monsters and live completely normally. Hiraku pretends he doesn't know what she is talking about. Lu then asks about the scissors he used earlier, assuming it is some kind of rare magic artifact. Seeing an opportunity to end his crushing loneliness, Hiraku suddenly asks Lu to stay and live with him forever. Lu is completely flustered by the sudden request. She tries to warn him that dangerous people are hunting her, but Hiraku confidently declares he doesn't care about that at all because he is determined to keep her around. He explains how miserable he was living in total isolation and begs her to stay. Lu blushes and reluctantly agrees, pointing out that she has nowhere else to go anyway. She then realizes his wording sounded exactly like a marriage proposal. Hiraku gets embarrassed but stands his ground, loudly declaring that a proposal is exactly what he meant, and he wants her to be his wife. Lu gives in and accepts the proposal, making Hiraku completely overjoyed. He picks her up and flies through the air in celebration while she screams in a total panic. The next morning, Hiraku finds Lu back in her childlike form standing in a field of yellow flowers. He asks why she shrank again, and Lu explains it is for her own protection so he won't try to touch her inappropriately. Hiraku nervously promises to restrain himself. He then tells her his plans to grow sweet potatoes next, since they preserve well and are very easy to cook. Lu suggests they try growing medicinal herbs for her research. She assumes they will need to go find seeds first, but Hiraku casually tells her he doesn't need any seeds to grow things. He then points out that since the wolves and spiders are basically pets, Lu is technically the very first human-like villager to move into his new settlement, making her the 30th resident overall. Lu clearly struggles with mornings, but Hiraku still appreciates having her live with him since she helps out in many ways. She easily uses her magic to light up the inside of his dark wooden shed. Later, Hiraku cooks a hearty meal of thick meat and green asparagus in his stone pot and serves it in wooden bowls. As they sit outside and eat, Hiraku complains that the food has a very mild flavor because he does not have any salt. He admits he has been looking everywhere for salt, but is ready to give up. Lu looks at him with a deadpan expression and simply points to the cave walls right behind them. She explains that the rocks are full of salt deposits, and all they have to do is dissolve the rock in water and boil it to extract the salt. Hiraku feels incredibly foolish for digging right past it without noticing. The next morning, Hiraku and Lu check on the new saplings he planted in the field. He tells Lu he planted oranges and peaches, and he plans to plant chestnuts next. They sit on a log and drink tea while the horned wolves sleep nearby. Hiraku tells Lu he wants to grow green tea leaves, noting that black tea and oolong tea all come from the same plant. Suddenly, a blonde angel with large white wings falls out of the sky into the forest. She cries and begs for forgiveness as several of Kuro's horned wolves surround her. Hiraku watches the scene unfold and gets a massive sense of déjà vu, remembering how Lu arrived in the exact same way. The angel fires glowing green orbs and cyan energy beams at the wolves, but the monsters easily dodge all her magical attacks. Hiraku calls off the wolves and asks the angel if she is alright. Lu suddenly arrives, and the angel immediately points at her, demanding she surrender. The angel introduces herself as Tia and explains she is hunting Lu because there is a massive bounty on her head. Tia claims Lu went on a rampage and blew up a noble's estate in the city. Lu defends herself, arguing that the noble kept forcing her to make strange medicines, so she decided to teach them a lesson. Tia yells that the explosion was not a little lesson, but Lu brushes it off as an accident. Tia then notes that fighting the wolves is a death sentence, and Lu agrees, admitting she learned firsthand how weak she really is against the pack. Tia then asks Lu who Hiraku is. Lu blushes and shyly introduces Hiraku as her husband. Tia is completely shocked by this news. Hiraku introduces himself properly, and Tia explains she is a warrior angel who serves God. Lu changes the subject and asks Tia if she wants to live on the farm with them. Tia is hesitant, so Lu drags her away to show her the massive crop fields and the orchard. Tia is amazed by the lush vegetables, but then Lu introduces her to the giant spider Zabuton. Tia is so terrified of the monster that she instantly faints and collapses in the dirt. When Tia wakes up, Hiraku and Lu tell her it is time to harvest the crops. Tia complains that an angel should not have to do manual labor, but Hiraku ignores her and tells her to start with the cabbages. Tia struggles to lift a massive green cabbage from the soil. Hiraku tears off a fresh leaf, sprinkles some of his newly extracted salt on it, and hands it to her. Tia takes a bite and is blown away by the incredible taste. She realizes that growing and harvesting her own food is highly rewarding. They spend the rest of the day harvesting huge amounts of cabbages and strawberries, filling several wicker baskets. They even use magic to lift heavy logs, while a massive stone golem helps carry timber. By sunset, Tia is exhausted but extremely happy with the work. She agrees to live with them permanently and asks Hiraku to plant even more strawberries. Hiraku points out that they are already operating at maximum capacity and cannot possibly harvest any more crops with just the 3 of them. The farm continues to grow in other ways. Kuro and Yuki's pups have grown their horns and started having puppies of their own. Hiraku realizes the original shed is far too small for the massive wolf pack, so he builds a brand new spacious dog area right next to the orchard. He wants to name all the new puppies, but there are simply too many to keep track of. Meanwhile, Zabuton's eggs hatch, and a massive swarm of tiny blue spiderlings floats down from the cave ceiling. The spiders use white silk parachutes to ride the wind and fly away into the sky. Hiraku assumes they are all leaving to find new homes, but he notices a few of the spiderlings decide to stay behind to help Zabuton on the farm. Realizing they desperately need more hands for the harvest, Tia announces she is leaving for a few days to find help. True to her word, she returns shortly after with a group of 7 high elves. The elves all wear matching green and white uniforms and introduce themselves to Hiraku as Leah, Leaf, Lekut, Lize, Lili, Lita, and Liz. Leah explains that they all have similar names because they are related. She tells Hiraku their tragic backstory. Their village in the north was completely destroyed after they got dragged into a human war. Their entire race was scattered, and these 7 elves have spent the last 200 years wandering through the dangerous forests, unable to settle down or repopulate. They bow and beg Hiraku to let them live on the farm. Tia and Lu vouch for the elves, assuring Hiraku they are incredibly hard workers. Hiraku gladly accepts them and welcomes them to the farm. However, just like Tia did, the 7 elves immediately faint from shock the moment they are introduced to Zabuton and the wolf pack. Since the farm now has 7 new residents, they need a place to live. Hiraku decides to build a massive cabin for them. He discovers that the elves are extremely skilled at construction and woodworking. Hiraku starts by digging a deep ditch and putting up a wooden fence. He also builds them a toilet and a garbage disposal area. He uses his magical farming tool to easily slice down giant unbreakable trees with a glowing yellow energy slash. The elves are amazed by his strength, but they take over the actual building process. They process the lumber, fit the logs together perfectly, and direct Hiraku on where to place the heavy timber. Working together, they finish building a massive 2-story log house in just 10 days. Tia and Lu are jealous of the beautiful new building and suggest they should rebuild their own small hut soon. Hiraku takes a tour of the finished log cabin. The house is shaped like a long rectangle stretching from east to west. The first floor features a large open living room that doubles as a dining room, with spacious storage rooms sitting on both the left and right sides. The second floor sits directly on top of the storage rooms and contains all their individual bedrooms. The entire cabin is illuminated by bright magical lighting on the ceiling. Hiraku looks down from the second floor balcony and feels proud to provide the elves with a safe and peaceful home. The elves quickly adapt to farm life and prove to be amazing helpers. While harvesting crops near the wooden fence, Hiraku sees the elves casually eating raw garlic and onions right out of the dirt. He is completely confused because he always believed elves were fragile, nature-loving creatures who hated fire, refused to wear metal, and only ate fruit from trees. The elves laugh at him and explain that anyone trying to live peacefully with nature in this dangerous forest would die instantly. They clarify that they are hardcore survivalists who use fire and eat meat all the time to stay alive. To prove their advanced skills, the elves offer to handle all the blacksmithing work for the farm. Following Leah's instructions, they build an earth and stone furnace. They gather iron sand from the river, feed it into the furnace along with charcoal, and heat it up to melt the iron. They then hammer the glowing metal on an anvil to process it. Soon they present Hiraku with a perfectly forged metal frying pan. Hiraku is amazed by how advanced they are and praises their skills. The elves explain they learned how to do everything during their 200 years of wandering. Hiraku jokes that they can do absolutely everything except settle down and reproduce, though he decides to keep that last thought to himself. Later, the elves gather a massive amount of green medicinal herbs and process them into white paste balls. They also notice the harvested wheat and ask Hiraku if they can bake bread. Hiraku happily agrees, and the elves bring out a special ceramic jar containing natural yeast to make the dough rise. They shape the dough into long strips, wrap them around sticks, and roast them over an open stone fire pit. Hiraku, Lu, Tia, and the elves all gather around the table to eat the freshly baked spiral bread skewers. The bread tastes absolutely incredible, and everyone is thrilled with the new food. Hiraku immediately decides he needs to expand the wheat fields so they can produce even more bread in the future. As the farm continues to grow into a massive, thriving settlement, Hiraku suddenly starts worrying about land ownership. He asks Lu if the forest belongs to anyone, and if he might get in trouble for building so many crop fields and houses without permission. Lu thinks for a moment and explains that the forest is technically under the control of the Demon Lord, which terrifies Hiraku. He panics, assuming the Demon Lord will be angry at him for stealing the land. However, Lu quickly reassures him that since he built the entire farm completely on his own without any outside support or funding, the land essentially belongs to him now. Hiraku feels relieved knowing he will not be evicted by a terrifying monster ruler. That night, Lu and Tia sit in the cabin eating fresh tomatoes and cucumbers from a wicker basket. They talk about how amazing Hiraku is for taming inferno wolves and a demon spider, and for having such a magical green thumb that grows massive vegetables. However, they also laugh about how completely clueless he is regarding the world around him. They note that he knows absolutely nothing about elves, angels, or basic geography. Despite his total lack of common sense, they are both incredibly happy to live with him on the farm. Meanwhile, Hiraku sits alone at his table under the warm light, completely unaware of their conversation. He looks at his wooden mug and decides that his next big project will be building a waterway for the farm. The next morning, Hiraku heads out to start his farm work and checks on the giant spider Zabuton. He is surprised to find that Zabuton has captured a massive queen bee and wrapped it tightly in her webbing. Hiraku realizes the bee could be useful for harvesting honey, so he asks Zabuton to let it live as a pet. Once the bee calms down, he builds a small wooden house for it near the orchard. The queen bee quickly establishes a large nest, and worker bees begin flying around to do their jobs. Since he needs the bees to produce honey, Hiraku plans to plant a flower garden nearby, so they have plenty of nectar to gather. Later, Tia comes looking for Hiraku but completely freaks out and runs away when she sees the giant bees crawling all over him. Moving on to his next project, Hiraku takes Leah to look at the massive reservoir he dug earlier. He explains his plan to draw water from the river to the farm, but admits he still has not decided what materials to use for the long waterway. Leah points out that finding workable stone in the forest is difficult, and Hiraku notes that a wooden waterway would leak too much over such a long distance. He comes up with a solution and uses his magical farming tool to compact the leftover dirt from the reservoir excavation. The tool turns the dirt into solid blocks that are as hard as concrete. Seeing this works perfectly, Hiraku and the elves go into mass production mode. He uses his tool to instantly shape the dirt into U-shaped structural pieces while the elves carry them off. They build an intake gate at the top of the waterfall, lay down a solid dirt foundation, and carefully place the waterway sections all the way to the reservoir. With the elves handling the heavy lifting and foundation work, the construction finishes much faster than Hiraku expected. As the water finally flows into the newly built reservoir, Hiraku is relieved that they no longer have to constantly pull water from the well. Suddenly, a large silver fish with sharp fangs leaps out of the incoming water and lands on the wooden platform. Hiraku is excited to finally have fish to eat, but Lu and Tia immediately recognize it as a highly dangerous monster fish native to the surrounding deadly forest. Ignoring their warnings, Hiraku swiftly slices the fish up with his hoe and roasts it on a spit over a campfire. He takes a bite and finds that it tastes exactly like normal salmon. He offers some to Lu and Tia, who are extremely hesitant at first, but the moment they take a bite, they are brought to tears by how delicious it is. Hiraku offers the rest of the roasted fish to the elves, who also fall in love with the taste. Over the next few days, they catch plenty more of the dangerous fish, salt them, and pack them away for winter storage. With the water supply secured, Hiraku decides to attempt growing a completely new crop and uses his farming hoe to till a patch of soil while focusing his thoughts on rice. To his surprise, golden rice stalks immediately sprout from the normal soil. Realizing he can grow it successfully, he announces to the elves that they are going to build a proper flooded rice paddy. The elves are confused when he digs a standard crop field, but Hiraku intensely compacts the dirt at the bottom to hold water. He uses a wooden bucket to pour water into the massive trench, filling it up to create a shallow pond. The elves are hesitant to step into the slimy mud at first, but they quickly get used to it. Hiraku hands out bundles of green rice seedlings, and everyone works together to plant them in neat rows across the flooded field. To keep pests away, Hiraku enlists Zabuton's children to guard the crop. Thanks to the steady water supply and the power of his farming tool, the rice matures instantly into a field of golden stalks. Hiraku gathers the elves and they swiftly harvest the entire paddy using sickles and his magic hoe. Afterwards, they tie the stalks into bundles and hang them on wooden racks to dry in the sun. Leah asks why they are doing this, and Hiraku admits he just copied the drying method from a television show he saw in his past life. Once the rice is fully dried, the real labor begins. Hiraku builds a wooden threshing machine covered in metal spikes to strip the grains from the stalks. He passes the grains through a wooden sieve to remove any leftover leaves. Finally, he uses a stone mortar to remove the husks and a heavy wooden pestle to polish the rice into pristine white grains. Tia is completely exhausted by the endless manual labor and complains about the long process, hoping they can finally eat. However, Hiraku insists they still need to cook it properly. He places the polished rice into a metal pot over a stone stove and recites a traditional cooking chant to ensure the timing is perfect. He asks Lu to light the fire for him, but she immediately unleashes a terrifying dark magic aura and prepares to blast the stove to smithereens. Hiraku quickly stops her and demands a low, slow flame instead. Lu complains that it is boring, but she complies and lights a steady fire under the pot. The elf girls watch from behind a tree, curious about the strange cooking method. When the rice is finally done, Hiraku lifts the lid to reveal perfectly steamed white rice. He carefully molds the hot rice into large triangles, stuffs them with the salted salmon they caught earlier, and arranges them on a wooden tray. He hands the fresh rice balls to Lu and Tia, who are highly skeptical that all this exhausting effort was worth it for a simple ball of rice. As soon as Lu takes a bite, she is overwhelmed with joy. Tia and the elves eagerly eat their portions and are equally delighted by the incredible flavor. Seeing how much everyone loves the food, Hiraku feels a deep sense of satisfaction and considers this his happiest moment as a farmer. He promises to work even harder and make more rice balls with different fillings in the future. The next day, after finishing another long shift working in the muddy rice paddy, Hiraku and the elves are covered in dirt. The elves simply use a quick cleansing spell to instantly remove all the mud and sweat from their bodies and clothes. Hiraku has no magic, so he has to wipe himself down manually with a cloth. Frustrated by this, he decides it is finally time to build a proper bathhouse. He explains the concept to the girls, drawing a floor plan in the dirt that includes a furnace, a large tub, a washing area, and a changing room. The elves suggest just bathing in the river, but Hiraku argues that the river will be entirely too cold during the winter. He passionately lectures them about the health and circulation benefits of hot baths until they agree to help him build it. The group quickly gets to work constructing the bathhouse. They compact dirt blocks to build a sturdy furnace and connect the water intake directly to the new waterway. Inside the wooden building, they construct a massive wooden tub, set up small stools for the washing area, and build shelves for the changing room. While reviewing the progress, Hiraku suddenly realizes they have a major sanitation issue. He does not want to dump their dirty bathwater and toilet waste directly back into the clean river. Tia easily solves the problem by suggesting they use slimes to eat the waste and purify the water. Hiraku is terrified at first, assuming slimes are dangerous monsters that kill inexperienced adventurers. Tia laughs off his fears and flies off to catch some. She quickly returns with several bouncy, harmless blue slimes and drops them into a dedicated purification pool connected to the waste waterway. She suggests putting slimes directly inside the toilet to keep it clean, but Hiraku refuses, feeling way too unnerved by the idea of doing his business right on top of a slime's head. With the plumbing issue resolved, Hiraku goes to gather firewood to heat the bath and spots several wild mushrooms growing on the logs. He admits he has been completely avoiding the mushrooms in the forest because he has no idea which ones are poisonous. Lu confirms that wild mushrooms are incredibly difficult to tell apart. The elves mention they just cook and eat them anyway, while Tia violently offers to exterminate all the fungi for him. Ignoring their extreme solutions, Hiraku decides to cultivate safe mushrooms himself. He uses his farming tool to strike the logs while visualizing specific edible varieties like shiitake and shimeji. The magical tool instantly grows perfectly safe mushrooms on the wood, securing another fresh food source for the farm. As evening approaches, the bath is finally ready. Hiraku gathers the girls outside the bathhouse to explain the rules. He tells them they must take off their clothes in the changing room and thoroughly wash themselves in the sitting area before getting into the hot tub. The girls are confused by the steps and ask him to demonstrate the process for them. Hiraku nervously strips down in the changing room, washes himself, and sinks into the steaming hot water while the elves watch him intently through the glass window. He closes his eyes, deeply enjoying the relaxation and remembering how he was forbidden from taking baths during his long hospitalization in his past life. Suddenly, the girls all strip off their clothes and excitedly jump into the tub with him. They argue that bathing together saves them the trouble of reheating the water later. Hiraku is entirely too embarrassed to relax with a group of naked women surrounding him, so he awkwardly gets out early. He realizes he made a massive mistake by not building separate baths for men and women, while the girls complain that it is unfair for him to want a private bath all to himself. Later, Hiraku checks on his cultivated mushrooms, sees they are growing perfectly, and plans to make a large mushroom hot pot for dinner. Just then, Kuro and the other wolves arrive at the farm escorting 5 new high elves. The newcomers introduce themselves as Lafa, Lassa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. They explain that they are actually from the exact same northern village as Leah and the others, and they have also spent the last 200 years wandering the dangerous forest, looking for a place to settle. Hiraku warmly invites them to live on the farm, and the 5 elves bow in deep gratitude. Leah and the original elves are thrilled to reunite with their long-lost friends and immediately volunteer to help build a new house for them. They also suggest using the opportunity to upgrade Hiraku's house since the population is growing so fast. With everyone cheering in agreement, Leah enthusiastically shouts that they should also start making babies right away to ensure the revival of the elf race. Hiraku sweats nervously at her bold declaration, but is ultimately glad that the elves are feeling so optimistic about their future. While the farm continues to thrive, Kuro reflects on his life from his own perspective. Before meeting Hiraku, Kuro lived his entire life alone in the forest and never lost a single battle. He intended to live as a solitary hunter forever, but everything changed when he met Yuki. He fought her and suffered a complete defeat, leading them to become mates and travel together. Eventually, Yuki became pregnant, and Kuro looked forward to raising a pack of their own. Unfortunately, their luck ran out when they crossed paths with the grappler bear, the undisputed king of the forest. The massive beast severely injured them, but ultimately decided to spare their lives. Weakened and unable to hunt, they were chased away by their usual prey and forced to flee to the center of the forest, a territory so dangerous that even the grappler bear avoids it. Expecting to die there, Kuro and Yuki stumbled upon Hiraku. Kuro was initially confused as to how such a weak-looking human could survive in the deadly forest, but he quickly sensed a limitless, terrifying power radiating from Hiraku's farming tool. Instead of finishing them off, Hiraku healed them, shared his great boar meat, and took them in. Kuro and Yuki immediately decided to swear loyalty to Hiraku and make him their master. Hiraku gave them names, provided them with a safe home, and fed them incredible meals, even making use of the animal innards that the wolves normally discarded. Over time, their pups grew up, and their family expanded into a massive pack. Now Kuro watches as his master easily commands a powerful vampire, a warrior angel, and a large group of skilled elves. Seeing this, Kuro realizes that Hiraku is far from the weak human he originally appeared to be. Kuro's only lingering concern is that Hiraku still seems completely oblivious to the fact that his beloved dogs are actually terrifying inferno wolves, but Kuro decides not to worry about it. He rests peacefully in the forest, incredibly thankful that his misfortune ultimately led him to the greatest master he could ever ask for. The construction of the massive 2-story log mansion is finally complete. Hiraku and the elves stand in the sandy clearing and admire the huge building. Leah tells Hiraku to keep digging so they can add a cellar. Hiraku asks if she wants him to keep going. She says they need big support beams as well. Hiraku uses his magic farming tool to effortlessly chop down a huge tree. The group discusses the design of the mansion. Leah mentions that they made sure to address all the requests of the future residents during the construction. Hiraku reminds her that he is a resident too. Leah tells him it would not be right if he did not have the nicest house on the farm. They head inside to tour the interior. They walk through the main hall. They look at the wooden tables and the large stone fireplace. Leah notes that the layout is very similar to her old house. They check out Hiraku's personal room. They cross the hall and enter the dining room. They find the kitchen in the back. They check the extra stoves set up outside. They go down the wooden stairs to explore the cellar. They agree it is perfect for storing food and firewood. They head to the second floor. Lou and Tia are thrilled to finally have their own private rooms. They walk down the hallway and find a room with a heavy wooden bolt lock on the door. Hiraku wonders why they put a lock there. He opens the door and sees a large gray bed. He decides to pretend he never saw it and closes the door. The girls tell Hiraku they love the new house. They enter the bathroom and find a large wooden bathtub on the stone floor. They look out the window at the giant tree. Hiraku thanks them for building the house. Leah tells him to let her know if anything needs fixing after the winter. Hiraku starts filling the tub with water. Later, Hiraku makes stone statues of Kuro and the other wolf. He places them on pedestals outside the front doors. Hiraku decides to make curry for the very first time. Lou and Tia ask what he is making. He explains it is curry and says it takes a lot of work to master from scratch. He says usually people just use pre-made roux block. He goes to his crop fields to gather the ingredients. He notes his farming tool lets him grow plants from many different climates. He harvests cumin seeds. He says cumin gives curry its unique aroma. Leah smells the seeds and finds the scent peculiar. Hiraku harvests turmeric roots. He explains they use the dried underground part to give the curry its yellow color. He asks the girls to use their magic to dry the spices out. He harvests coriander next. He explains they grind the seeds into powder. He says it has a fresh, fruity smell. He takes the green cilantro leaves and offers them to the wolves. The wolves smell the leaves and completely freak out. They roll around on the ground in distress. Lou and Tia are shocked that the plant can repel inferno wolves. They decide to research the plant to make a magical protection talisman. Hiraku gathers black pepper and cayenne peppers. He wonders if girls find it annoying when guys make curry entirely from scratch. He sets up an outdoor cooking station. He asks Leah to help him cook since Lou and Tia are busy researching the cilantro. Leah happily agrees. Hiraku heats rapeseed oil in a large metal pan. He adds rabbit meat to the hot oil. He asks Leah to grind the spices into powder. She uses a stone mortar and pestle to crush them. Hiraku sears the meat until it is brown. He removes the meat from the heat. He adds the cumin seeds to the leftover meat juices. He cooks them carefully to release their aroma. He adds finely diced onions, ginger, and garlic to the pan. He tells Leah they have to sauté them without burning them. He adds diced tomatoes next. He cooks the mixture until it turns into a thick paste. He adds the ground spice powders and some salt. He adds the seared meat back into the pan. He pours in boiled soybeans and water. He puts a wooden lid on the pot and lets it simmer. Hiraku suddenly realizes he forgot to make naan bread. He panics. Leah asks what naan is. Hiraku explains it is a type of bread to eat with the curry. He wonders if he should just serve rice instead. Leah insists she wants to try the naan. Hiraku calculates how many portions he needs for all the elves. He realizes he has to make a huge batch. He kneads the dough on a wooden table. He tells Leah they have to flatten it with a rolling pin. She takes the rolling pin and flattens the dough. Hiraku explains they normally cook it inside a stove. He decides to cook it by sticking the dough directly onto the outside of a hot metal pot instead. He slaps the flat dough pieces onto the hot pot. The smell of the food attracts the other girls. They peek over the bushes and watch him cook. Hiraku lifts the lid on the curry. A glowing light shines from the pot. The girls gather around the table as the sun sets. They look at the brown curry with wide eyes. Some of them are hesitant to try it because of the strange color. Hiraku tells them not to be shy. He serves them bowls of curry with pieces of naan bread. He explains they need to use the flatbread to scoop up the curry. Hiraku takes a bite and loves it. He says he can taste all the spices. The girls take a bite. They are completely amazed by the flavor. They say the tingly spiciness is highly addicting. They close their eyes and enjoy the meal. They tell Hiraku that the dish is totally worth researching. They say every bite makes them want to eat more. Hiraku is glad they like it. He asks them to leave a little bit for him. He gives some of the leftover curry to the wolves. The wolves eat it aggressively. They love it even though it is spicy. Hiraku realizes he is completely sold out of food again. The girls say they are stuffed and want to eat it again soon. Hiraku says he has the recipe memorized and wants to adjust the spice ratios next time. Winter quickly draws near. Hiraku prepares for the upcoming snow. He hauls a wooden sled across the dirt. He says they will spend most of their time indoors once the snow falls. He checks the firewood supply in the storage shed. He brings a basket of potatoes to Zabuton. Zabuton is resting on a high tree branch covered in a white cloth. Hiraku brings extra blankets for her hibernation. He checks on Leah and the other elves. They are building a forge and other projects to work on during the winter. Hiraku asks Lu and Tia to preserve food. They use magic to smoke and dry slabs of rabbit meat. Kuro and the wolves jump up and steal some of the meat skewers. Hiraku yells at them to give the meat back. He builds a wooden storage unit for vegetables. He puts cabbages and radishes in the top boxes. He leaves the bottom boxes empty to catch melting snow water. He covers the unit with a white sheet and buries it in snow. He explains this snow storage keeps the vegetables fresh. Lu uses fire magic in the cabin. Hiraku tries to cast wind magic but fails. He tries to cast earth magic to build a stone golem like Tia. He fails completely. He talks to Lu inside the cabin. He admits he cannot use magic at all. He says he feels useless compared to everyone else. Lu tells him he is the most amazing person there. She says no one else could survive in this deadly forest like he has. Snow covers the forest and winter officially arrives. They stay inside the warm cabin. Hiraku carves wooden games to pass the time. He makes a reversi set, a chess set, and a mahjong set. He explains the rules of reversi to the girls. He says they have to surround the opponent's pieces to flip them. Lu thinks the game is far too simple. Tia challenges her to a match. They start playing. Hiraku watches them. Tia starts losing badly. She gets mad and flips the wooden board over. The pieces fly everywhere. Hiraku says they have to start the game over. Lu uses her magic to levitate the pieces. She puts them all back in their exact spots. Tia is extremely embarrassed. Hiraku checks on the wolves. Kuro is playing chess with another wolf. Hiraku is shocked that the wolves understand the rules and are actually playing the game right. Lu challenges Kuro to a game. She loses terribly to the wolf. She sits in the corner and gets deeply depressed. Hiraku decides to avenge her. He challenges Kuro, Tia, and Leah to a game of mahjong. They play for a while. Hiraku thinks he is about to win. He declares his winning move. Suddenly, Kuro makes a winning move at the exact same time. Kuro reveals he has a rare hand called 13 Orphan. Kuro takes all of Hiraku's points and wins the entire game. Hiraku is defeated and praises Kuro. Hiraku decides they need a different game. He builds a mini bowling set. He carves wooden pins and draws criminals on them. He makes a scam artist, an arsonist, and a serial killer. Lu asks why they have to knock the pins down. Hiraku says they are taking out bad guys. He throws the wooden ball and knocks down 8 pins. The girls cheer for him. They spend the rest of the winter playing games and eating hot pot together. The snow eventually melts and spring arrives. Hiraku goes outside and looks at the clear sky. He says it is a nice morning. He greets Lu and Tia. They ask what the plan is for the day. Hiraku says he wants to finish planting the crops. He also mentions that Zabuton should be waking up soon. Suddenly they hear a loud noise. They look up at the sky. A massive flying creature approaches the farm. Hiraku thinks it is a dragon. Tia corrects him and says it is a wyvern. The wyvern dives toward the forest. It opens its mouth and shoots a massive cyan magic beam. Suddenly, a powerful blast of energy shoots up from the ground. The blast strikes the wyvern directly. The wyvern is completely vaporized in a bright flash of light. Hiraku, Lu, and Tia stare at the sky in total shock. Hiraku checks the surrounding area after completely vaporizing the wyvern with his spear. He notices some minor damage to the crop fields, but he sees that all the buildings are completely fine. Hiraku confirms that he successfully took the monster down. Lu and Tia explain that finding a wyvern of that massive size is an extremely rare occurrence. Hiraku wonders if someone intentionally sent the wyvern to attack them. Lu dismisses the idea immediately. She explains that even if the wyvern was under someone's command, they would never send such a rare and valuable creature out into the forest completely on its own. Hiraku feels relieved to hear this and decides to treat the attack as a random accident. He then immediately asks the girls if wyvern meat is edible. Lu explains that wyvern meat is actually considered a massive delicacy in this world. She tells a story about a foolish king who sent his entire army into a wyvern den just to bring some meat back for him to taste. Hiraku jokes that the story probably ended with the entire army getting burned alive and eaten. Later that evening, Hiraku prepares a massive feast for everyone using the wyvern meat. He serves a thick wyvern round steak seasoned with various spices. He also wraps the wyvern breast meat in large green leaves and steams it to perfection. For the tail meat, he simmers it down into a hearty stew filled with fresh vegetables. The girls eagerly dig into the food. Lu is completely amazed by how tender the meat is. She notes that a regular knife cannot even pierce wyvern skin, so she expected it to be incredibly tough. Taya stuffs her face with food and mumbles about how delicious everything tastes. Hiraku tells her to swallow her food before trying to talk. He tries the stew and loves the rich flavor of the broth. The elves agree that every single bite of the meat is packed with incredible flavor. As they eat, Lu and Tia discuss the massive attack Hiraku used to kill the beast. Tia admits she could never block a strike like. She points out that Hiraku's spear pierced right through the wyvern's triple-layer magical barrier before blowing a hole straight through its chest. They both agree that they are incredibly lucky to have met Hiraku and the wolves when they first arrived in the forest. Far away in the demonic kingdom of Galgardo, the Demon Lord's generals receive a terrifying report about the battle. Beazle, Randon, and Gratz sit at a large table in complete shock. They learn that a massive wyvern was killed in just 2 hits from the ground. Gratz refuses to believe it and assumes it is a joke. He states that a wyvern approaching usually requires them to mobilize their entire military force just to survive. Randon panics and grabs his head in frustration. He complains that they just finished getting the annual budget approved and absolutely cannot afford to deal with a threat of this magnitude. Randon suddenly suggests that they should all just resign from their positions to avoid the problem entirely. Gratz tells him to stop joking around, but Randon is completely serious. Meanwhile, at the Gatekeeper Dragon's lair, the massive blue dragon Drime talks with his associate Gucci. They both witnessed Hiraku's massive magical blast from afar. Gucci asks Drime what would happen if the dragon took a direct hit from that attack. Drime calmly admits that the blast would pierce cleanly right through his body. He decides it would be incredibly foolish to ever attack that forest. Back at the farm, Hiraku looks at his crop fields and decides it is finally time to start making alcohol. He tells the elves that they are going to use the grapes to make wine. The elves get extremely excited and quickly harvest all the ripe grapes. They fill multiple wooden baskets to the brim. Hiraku explains that they need to squash the grapes to let them ferment properly. He builds a massive wooden vat for the task. Lalasha, one of the high elves, builds several watertight wooden barrels to store the juice. Hiraku tells the girls they need to walk barefoot on top of the grapes to crush them. Lu is slightly hesitant to step on something they are planning to drink. Hiraku assures them it is fine and says they can switch out if anyone gets tired. Hiraku stands by the wooden trough to switch the barrels as they fill up with juice. The elves step into the vat and start stomping on the grapes. The fruit squishes under their feet, splashing purple juice all over their legs. Hiraku tells them to move in a circular motion and warns them to be careful not to slip. Lu accidentally bumps into one of the elves during the process. She apologizes, and the elves realize they need a way to keep their rhythm in sync. One of the elves suggests singing an old village working song to help them coordinate their movements. They start singing and counting their steps together. The rhythm perfectly syncs their action. Suddenly, their magical energy reacts to the song in the crushed grapes. A glowing pink slime forms in the juice and wraps around their legs. Hiraku uses a large wooden beam to press the magical slime directly into the barrels. Sylvia, Kazuna, Himikawa, and Eurytia eventually join the fun. They stomp the grapes joyfully until they are completely exhausted. They manage to fill 16 large barrels with grape mash. Sylvia worries they might drink it all too fast, but Hiraku assures her the natural yeast on the grape skins will ferment the juice perfectly. In a distant cosmic realm, the goddess of agriculture yells furiously at God. She is incredibly angry that God mistakenly punished an innocent human soul and then sent him to the deadly forest of death. She is even more furious that God gave Hiraku the holy lance. She complains that the holy weapon is supposed to drain a human's life force and kill them instantly. God defends his actions, stating that Hiraku is only using the ultimate weapon as a simple farming tool. He explains that he gave Hiraku a super healthy body with fast recovery abilities, so the spear does not harm him at all. The goddess refuses to accept his excuses. She also complains that the wooden statue Hiraku carved to worship God looks exactly like an old man. God argues that the statue's appearance is not his fault, but the goddess ignores him. She punishes God by forcing him to sit completely frozen in place for 300 years. God begs his daughter for forgiveness, but she refuses to listen. Back at the village, Zabuton ties up an intruder with her strong spider webs. Hiraku approaches and finds a white-haired girl bound tightly to a tree. Lou sees her and immediately recognizes the girl as Flora. Flora is Lou's cousin and also a vampire. Flora cries out for help and begs Lou to save her. She explains that she heard Lou was being chased by a black-hearted angel, so she rushed all the way to the forest to rescue her. Tia laughs mischievously and asks who Flora is calling black-hearted. Flora gets nervous and quickly claims it was just an expression. Lou tells Flora to relax and invites her to stay with them at the farm. Flora admits she has a hard time believing Hiraku is actually Lou's husband because he looks like a completely normal human. However, Lou explains that Hiraku is the master of the Inferno Wolves and recently killed a wyvern by himself. Flora is absolutely terrified to learn that the dogs roaming the farm are actually legendary Inferno Wolves. She immediately drops to the ground and aggressively apologizes to Hiraku for her rude behavior. Hiraku tells her not to worry about it at all. Later, Hiraku prepares a large dinner to welcome Flora to the village. He serves more wyvern meat and a few new dishes. Flora is completely amazed by the incredible food. She points to her soup and asks about the soft white cubes floating in the broth. Hiraku explains that the food is called tofu. He says he made it from soybeans after a lot of trial and error. He mentions that he really wants to make miso and soy sauce next. Flora has absolutely no idea what those are. Hiraku explains that miso and soy sauce are made by fermenting soybean. He compares the process to making wine or cheese. He notes that the people in this world do not seem to know about the tiny microorganisms that actually cause fermentation. Flora is completely fascinated by this scientific concept. She realizes that invisible organisms can change matter without using any magic whatsoever. Her peaceful demeanor completely vanishes, and she becomes intensely excited. She declares that she has found a brand new subject for her magical research. She vows to bring miso and soy sauce to everyone in the world. She abruptly leaves the village to gather her belongings so she can move in permanently. 1 month later, Flora returns to the village. She brings a large group of maids with her. The head maid introduces herself as Anne. Anne explains that she represents all the other maids. They are actually a race of ogres, and each maid has a single white horn on her forehead. Flora also brings several cows with her. Hiraku is extremely happy to see the cows because they can finally gather milk to make butter and cheese. Hiraku tells Anne not to be so formal, but the maids insist on serving him perfectly. Shortly after, Tia returns from a trip of her own. She brings her own subordinates to the village to help out. 3 angel guards named Gran Maria, Kudel, and Corone introduce themselves to Hiraku. They wear heavy armor and carry large spears. Tia explains she brought them to act as the village's dedicated security force. Next, a large green lizardman named Daga introduces himself. He represents a whole group of muscular lizardmen. They also bring a wooden cage containing a live chicken. Tia excitedly asks if the chicken breathes fire, but Hiraku clarifies that it only lays eggs. He is incredibly excited to have a steady supply of eggs for his daily cooking. The village quickly grows much more lively and organized. Anne and the ogre maids take over all the cleaning duties. They work incredibly fast and keep the wooden cabins completely spotless. Hiraku notices the maids only eat simple boiled food. He decides to teach them different cooking methods like frying, steaming, and braising. He shows them how to properly cook killer rabbit meat with fragrant vegetables. The maids master the heat control quickly and start making amazing meals on their own. Meanwhile, Gran Maria, Kudel, and Corone patrol the surrounding forest from the sky to watch for threats. Daga and the lizard men take over all the heavy outdoor labor. They carry massive logs and significantly speed up the construction of new buildings. Hiraku gives Daga a red scarf to wear on his arm, so he can easily tell him apart from the other lizardmen. A few days later, Leah returns with a massive group of female elves. She explains she gathered all the elves who were still wandering the forest and brought them to the farm. Hiraku is completely shocked by the sheer number of women and asks where all the men are. Leah casually replies that no men survived the monster attack. She cheerfully adds that they can just start making more men now. Hiraku decides not to ask how they plan to do that and simply welcomes the new elves to the farm. The village population explodes, prompting Hiraku to officially name their home. He calls a meeting with the representatives of all the different groups. Lu, Tia, and Daga, the elves Kuro and Zabuton gather in the main hall. Hiraku explains that the farm has grown into a real town, so they need a proper name. The elves suggest naming it after him, proposing names like Hiraku Village or Machio Town. Hiraku hates that idea and quickly rejects it. He asks the group what the surrounding forest is called. They tell him it is known as the Forest of Death. Hiraku immediately rejects the idea of calling their home the Village of Death because it sounds like a ghost town. He points to the massive, ancient tree standing in the center of their settlement. He declares that they will call their home the Great Tree Village. Everyone loves the name and completely agrees with his choice. Hiraku opens the giant wooden doors and announces a massive party to celebrate the naming. They build a huge bonfire outside in the clearing. Hiraku brings out the very first batch of wine they made from the grapes. He tells everyone to drink up and enjoy themselves. The villagers cheer loudly and start calling him mayor. Hiraku tries to decline the title, but everyone insists he is the only one fit for the job. He reluctantly accepts his new role as the village leader. The party gets incredibly wild. The elves dance and sing around the fire. The wolves pass out on the ground from drinking too much wine. Flora gets completely drunk and falls asleep on a picnic table. Hiraku sits with Lu near the fire. Lu notices him zoning out and asks what is wrong. Hiraku smiles and says he is just happy because his peaceful life feels exactly like a dream. Lu assures him it is definitely not a dream and promises that they will all keep living happily together. Hiraku agrees. Lu raises her wooden mug and toasts to the Great Tree Village. Hiraku clinks his mug against hers and smiles as the celebration continues late into the night. As the seasons change, the village population grows, and Hiraku settles into his role as mayor, though his daily routine of farming vegetables like cabbages and tomatoes remains largely the same. One afternoon, Grandmaria flies in and urgently informs him that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived. Hiraku gets incredibly nervous since this is his first real task as mayor. He goes to the village entrance and meets Beazle, a formal man in a red suit, who introduces himself as a representative of the Demon Lord. Beazle immediately presents a magical potion as a gift to show goodwill, which surprises Hiraku. Beazle explains that he is here to discuss the status of the settlement, as the land technically belongs to the Demon Lord. Hiraku starts panicking, worrying that the Demon Lord is either going to demand exorbitant taxes or kick them off the property completely. Feeling the pressure, Hiraku decides to take the initiative and show that he has no intention of rebelling against the demonic kingdom. He boldly offers to pay a portion of their harvest as tax to secure their right to live there. Wanting to start negotiations from a strong position, Hiraku aggressively suggests a 10% tax rate, fully expecting Beazle to counteroffer. However, Beazle takes one look at the heavily armed angels, high elves, and the massive magical sword nearby, and immediately agrees to the terms out of sheer terror. Hiraku is slightly confused by how quickly the deal is settled, but asks Beazle to send someone to collect the goods every year before winter. They quickly draft and sign a formal contract, stipulating that the 10% tax only applies to crops grown in the fields, excluding animal products like milk, eggs, honey, and alcohol. Hiraku makes sure to add a clause stating that if the Demon Lord wants any of those extra items, they will have to negotiate separate trades for them. Still feeling like he pushed too hard in the negotiations, Hiraku decides to give Beazle a large batch of fresh apples as a parting gift. Beazle graciously accepts the fruit and heads back home. After he leaves, Hiraku asks Lu and Tia if he handled the situation correctly. Lu assures him that he did an incredible job because the standard tax rate for living on Demon Lord territory is usually around 50 or 60%. The High Elves also point out that by forcing the demons to collect the tax only once a year, they prevent the demonic kingdom from accurately auditing their actual total harvest. Hiraku finally realizes that he essentially bought the complete protection of the Demon Lord for an incredibly low price. Lu then examines the potion Beezle brought and reveals it is an almighty medicine capable of healing any injury, confirming that the demons genuinely want to stay on their good side. Far away in the dark castle of the demonic kingdom, Beezle reports the results of his mission to his fellow generals, Gratz and Randon. They are completely baffled that a small farming village has the military strength to defeat a wyvern and initially suspect a trap. However, Beezle explains the horrifying reality of what he saw in the forest. He tells them that the village is guarded by the legendary vampire princess Lu, the strongest angel of annihilation Tia, a massive army of high elves, a pack of deadly inferno wolves, and the notorious killer angel trio. The generals realize that a force like that could easily destroy their entire kingdom. Beezle admits that he had no choice but to accept the 10% tax offer, because refusing it would have instantly turned that massive army into their enemies. He considers it a massive victory that they managed to establish an amicable relationship without starting a war. Beezle then brings out the box of apples Hiraku gave him. Before they can even eat the fruit, they notice the white cloth wrapping the box. They quickly realize it is made from the silk of a great demon spider, an ancient monster that once fought a previous demon lord to a standstill. Knowing that the village also commands a great demon spider pushes Randan over the edge, and he immediately tries to resign from his position to escape the stress, leaving the other generals in complete despair. Back at the village, another unexpected guest arrives. The massive gatekeeper dragon Drime lands in the village alongside his associate Gucci. They come to formally greet Hiraku as their neighbor, since Drime's lair is located in the mountains to the south. Drime presents Hiraku with a highly valuable magical sword as a gift. Hiraku graciously accepts the weapon but notes that it is quite difficult to converse with a dragon of that size. Gucci quickly instructs Drime to transform into his human form, and the dragon shrinks down into a man with dark hair and a mustache. Hiraku invites them inside for a feast, and Drime absolutely falls in love with the food and the newly brewed wine. He gets completely drunk and refuses to leave, declaring that he wants to live in the village permanently. Gucci has to forcefully drag the intoxicated dragon away, reminding him that he has a duty to protect his own territory. After the dragon departs, Hiraku realizes that the village needs a proper system for handling visitors. Up until now, they either kept people waiting outside the gate or brought them into their personal homes, neither of which is ideal. He consults with the elves and decides to build a dedicated guest house. The elves immediately begin constructing a massive 2-story wooden lodge capable of comfortably holding over 30 people, complete with a large feasting hall on the first floor and numerous bedrooms on the second. Hiraku then addresses the village's rather aggressive greeting methods. Previously, the angel guards would simply capture anyone they found and drag them to the village, while the giant spider Zabuton would sound an alarm that caused every resident to grab weapons and prepare for a fight. To make things more welcoming, they install a silver bell to calmly signal the arrival of guests. Hiraku originally suggests a small welcoming party consisting of just himself, Lu, and Tia, but the others reject the idea, warning that enemies might try to sneak in disguised as friendly travelers. They compromise by including high elves, ogre maids, and lizardmen in the welcoming committee to ensure security, while Flora volunteers to secretly keep watch over any visitors from the shadows. The new system is put to the test when a group of 4 wolf-eared beastmen arrives at the edge of the forest. Their leader introduces himself as Garf and explains that they hail from Howling Village in the eastern mountains and wish to establish trade relations. Tia warmly welcomes them, but immediately points out that she knows they have more troops hiding in the woods. She firmly warns Garf that any hidden individuals will be treated as hostile enemies. Garf gets incredibly nervous and apologizes, explaining that leaving people behind in hiding is just a standard security measure when visiting a new settlement. Tia accepts his explanation and leads the group across the bridge into the village. Garf and his companions are completely amazed by the quality of the wooden buildings and the formal greetings from the ogre maids. However, Hiraku notices that Tia and the maids are not offering the beastmen the same luxurious treatment they gave to the dragon. Instead of a grand feast, the maids serve the beastmen a simple meal of bread and vegetables. Tia explains that since the beastmen did not bring any tribute or gifts, and because they initially hid troops in the forest, they are receiving standard hospitality rather than VIP treatment. Hiraku feels bad offering such a meager meal to people who traveled so far. Overruling the others, he decides to show some kindness by offering the beastmen a small amount of wine. Garf and his men are absolutely thrilled by the drink. Hiraku uses the opportunity to ask Garf about Howling Village. Garf explains that their settlement is about 500 years old and primarily relies on hunting and mining for survival. They usually trade their goods with a human village across the mountains, but recent instability there forced them to seek a new trading partner. They learned about Great Tree Village from one of the Demon Lord's subordinates and decided to make the journey. Garf proposes an open market exchange since neither village uses actual currency. He asks if Hiraku's people can travel to Howling Village for the trades, as the journey through the forest is too difficult for the beastmen to make regularly. Hiraku realizes he can easily use the Inferno Wolves as pack animals to transport goods through the woods, so he agrees to the arrangement. They decide to trade the beastmen's mined goods, such as paints, silverware, and glassworks, for the village's fresh food crops. Before they leave, Hiraku reassures Garf not to worry about failing to bring a gift, emphasizing that the thought is more important than the item. Garf is deeply relieved and promises to bring something next time. When it is time for the first official trade mission, the villagers forbid Hiraku from going, stating that a leader should not leave his territory so casually. Instead, Tia is selected to lead the expedition alongside several lizardmen. Rather than walking the whole way, the Dragon Drime offers to fly the entire group to Howling Village in exchange for a single barrel of wine. Hiraku happily agrees to the deal, and the group takes off into the sky. When the massive dragon lands in Howling Village, the beastmen are absolutely terrified, but the trade mission turns out to be a massive success. Tia brings out free samples of their food, which instantly draws a massive crowd. The beastmen love the produce so much that they even buy the personal wine stash Tia brought for herself. Upon returning to Great Tree Village, Tia reports the incredible success to Hiraku. She also brings up a new request from the Howling Village mayor. 20 young beastkin women want to move to Great Tree Village permanently. Hiraku thinks about the village's extreme gender imbalance, realizing that he is practically the only adult male surrounded by dozens of women. He worries that without more men, the village has no real future. He tells Tia that he will happily accept all 20 women, but only on the condition that Howling Village also sends at least 2 young men to help balance the population. A few days later, the new group of immigrants arrives. A beastkin girl named Senna introduces herself as their representative. She is extremely nervous and begs Hiraku not to abandon them, stating that they are mentally prepared to do whatever labor is required. Hiraku immediately disarms her fears, welcoming them warmly and telling them to take their time getting used to the village before worrying about work or permanent housing. Senna is overjoyed by his kindness. Remembering his specific condition, Hiraku asks Senna if they brought the men he requested. Senna enthusiastically confirms that they brought 3 males with them and proudly presents them to the group. Hiraku and the elves look down and see 3 tiny wide-eyed beastkin children. They quickly realize that these boys are years away from adulthood, meaning the village's severe lack of men will remain completely unsolved for at least another decade. The newly arrived beastmen start settling into the village, but the girls end up fainting constantly because they are absolutely terrified of the giant spiders and wolves roaming around the area. Hiraku notes that they will just have to get used to living with the monsters over time if they want to survive here. Later, while Senna plays in the dirt with the other beastfolk children, she suddenly uses a spell to levitate some items. Hiraku realizes that literally everyone in the village except him can use magic. The angels can fly and shoot beams, the high elves can manipulate the environment, the lizardmen cast water spells on the crops, and even the spiders, wolves, bees, and slimes all possess their own unique magical ability. Feeling a bit left out as the only non-magic user, Hiraku decides to just focus on what he does best, and continues working tirelessly with his almighty farming tool. Suddenly, a massive shockwave rocks the forest, nearly knocking him over. Gran Maria quickly flies over and reports that a giant grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting in the northern woods, causing the entire area to shake. Hiraku wonders if the beasts are edible, and Gran Maria confirms that hunters often eat bear meat when they can get it. Hiraku asks her to fly him over to the battle site so they can secure the meat before it goes to waste. Gran Maria carries him through the sky, and they soon spot the 2 massive beasts locked in a brutal combat. Without hesitation, Hiraku uses his tool to blast both monsters, instantly killing them with effortless, precise strikes. Gran Maria and the other angels are completely stunned by his overwhelming power, admitting they could never take down such beasts alone. The lizardmen help drag the massive carcasses back to the village on sleds, and Hiraku immediately gets to work on cooking the meat. He chops up the bear meat, tosses it into a giant silver pot, and braises it using their precious red wine along with various herbs. The maids panic over the wasted wine, but Hiraku ignores their complaints and tells them this is a normal cooking method for tough meat. When he tastes the bear stew, he finds it incredibly gamey. Next, he takes the bloody viper meat, coats it in batter, and deep fries it until it is golden brown. The angels absolutely love the fried snake, and Hiraku notes that it tastes exactly like fried chicken breast. However, he realizes that the dish is missing mayonnaise, so he decides to make some from scratch. He heads over to Flora's laboratory to ask for an antibacterial medicine that can safely kill harmful microorganisms, hoping to use it for his upcoming fermentation project. Flora gives him a safe, clear potion but complains that her own attempts at making miso failed completely. She explains that she followed his instructions perfectly, but ended up blowing up her hut 3 times because she used explosive magic to try and speed up the fermentation process. Hiraku agrees to help her try again without using any destructive explosions. They head to the kitchen, and Hiraku starts making mayonnaise by whisking fresh eggs, apple vinegar, salt, and oil together in a golden bowl. Flora tastes the finished creamy mayonnaise and loves it so much that she wants to eat it straight out of the bowl, but Hiraku quickly stops her, warning her that it is terrible for her health. They then move on to prepping the miso. They boil a large pot of soaked soybeans, mash them up in ceramic mortars using heavy wooden pestles, and mix them together in a wooden tub. Hiraku uses his farming tool to magically generate kui mold for the mixture while chanting a mold-making song. They form the dough into small balls, pack them tightly into wooden barrels weighed down with heavy stones, and store them down in the cellar to age patiently for the next few months. A while later, a maid announces that they have unexpected visitors. A group of elder dwarves led by a man named Donovan arrives at the village. Donovan explains that they traveled a long way after hearing about the village's extremely high-quality crops. He admits that they do not have any money to buy alcohol, but he offers to share their advanced brewing technology in exchange for supplies and a place to stay. Hiraku gladly accepts the deal, and the dwarves immediately get to work with the harvested corn. They set up a copper distillation apparatus with curved pipes and process the village's corn into a crystal-clear corn whiskey. Hiraku takes a sip of the new drink and is instantly shocked by how incredibly strong it is. Donovan laughs at his low tolerance, and the dwarves agree to stay in the village permanently as their official master brewers. That night, the village throws a massive welcomes party for the beastmen and the dwarves inside the large banquet hall. Everyone drinks heavily and enjoys the feast together. Seeing an opportunity to fix the village's severe gender imbalance, Hiraku approaches Donovan and asks if any of the single girls catch his eye. Donovan carefully looks over the beautiful elves and beastkin, but ultimately states that they are all far too young for him. Furthermore, he explicitly states that he is only attracted to women who can grow a thick beard. Hiraku realizes the cultural barrier is way too high and completely gives up on playing matchmaking. A few days later, Hiraku is working in the forest when he suddenly spots 3 large dragons flying through the sky. Assuming it is another hostile wyvern attack, he hurls a powerful blast of magical energy at them. He misses his first shot but successfully strikes a white dragon with a second beam, sending it tumbling toward the ground in pain. Before he can finish them off, Gucci rushes out of the woods in a panic and begs him to stop. Gucci explains that the dragons are actually Dryme's wife Grafaloon and his daughter Lastismoon. Dryme's constant sneaking out at night with valuable items from his treasury made Grafaloon suspect that he was having an affair. She came to the village fully intending to burn it to the ground in a fit of rage. However, upon seeing the village and meeting everyone, Grafaloon and Lasti realized that Dryme was simply bringing gifts to his new friends and getting drunk at the tavern. They sincerely apologized to Hiraku for the misunderstanding and the near attack, while Grafaloon harshly scolds Dryme for his heavy drinking habit. Despite the peaceful resolution, Grafaloon realizes that Hiraku's power is absolutely terrifying since he easily overpowered her in the sky. To ensure that his immense power is never turned against the dragon tribe, she commands Lasti to stay and live in the village to keep an eye on him. Lasti excitedly agrees to the arrangement and promises to do her best. Hiraku tries to put her to work in the vegetable gardens, but her immense dragon strength causes her to accidentally crush the delicate tomatoes. She then tries washing dishes in the tavern but shatters all the plates into pieces. When she attempts to use magic to carefully harvest apples, she completely blows them up into black smoke. To make matters worse, her sheer presence as an apex predator completely terrifies the wolves, cows, and chickens, causing them to stop producing milk and eggs entirely. Realizing physical labor is a terrible fit for her, Hiraku decides to make Lasti the official village diplomat. Shortly after, a formal merchant arrives at the village to purchase fruit. When he realizes he is negotiating directly with a legendary dragon, he is completely paralyzed by sheer terror. Lasti cheerfully offers him boxes of strawberries, apples, pears, persimmons, and watermelons, and the terrified merchant blindly buys out their entire stock without daring to count the items or question the prices just to escape with his life. News of the village acquiring a legendary dragon eventually reaches the dark castle of the demonic kingdom. The demon lord and his generals, Bezel, Randon, and Gratz, are completely panicked by the village's rapidly growing military might. They decide they need to send a spy to monitor the situation without provoking an outright war. Bezel's daughter, Florim, confidently volunteers for the mission, boasting about her exceptional magical abilities. She teleports to the sky above the village and uses a floating spell to observe the layout, wondering how such a prosperous and well-organized settlement exists in a forest filled with deadly monsters. When she lands near the gate, Lasti cheerfully welcomes her. Florim is instantly intimidated to be face-to-face with the infamous dragon. Lasti gives her a quick tour, proudly showing off the vineyard and bragging about the delicious wine they produce. Florim secretly finds it completely absurd that a legendary dragon is bragging about growing crops instead of conquering lands. At that moment, an angel arrives to deliver a message, prompting Lasti to leave Florim alone for a bit. Florim uses the golden opportunity to sneak around and analyze the village's military strength. Peeking from behind the trees, she spots the muscular lizardmen moving crates, the beastmen, the ogres, and the elder dwarves. She then notices the vampire princess Lu and the angel of annihilation Tia discussing defenses. She also spots the trio of killer angels and a group of high elves, whom she genuinely believes to be terrifying man-eaters that systematically kidnap helpless men. As she ventures deeper into the forest, Florim witnesses the giant demon spiders and the inferno wolves working together as a single unified pack. Seeing all these legendary monsters cooperating flawlessly shatters her confidence as one of the Demon Kingdom's top magic users. She assumes Lasti must be commanding this overwhelming army, but she suddenly remembers that there is a mayor who rules above the dragon. Florim wonders what kind of terrifying entity could possibly command such a monstrous force. While she is distracted looking at her map, she bumps into Hiraku, who is casually walking through the woods carrying a large hammer and some freshly picked crops. Thinking he is just a weak, ordinary human servant, Florim acts incredibly dismissive and rudely tells him she does not need his help with anything. Later on, Florim speaks with Lasti and discovers that the seemingly ordinary human she just insulted is actually the mayor who single-handedly defeated Lasti's mother. Florim's face turns pale, and she goes into a full panic over her massive mistake, terrified that he might obliterate her for being so rude. Despite her absolute dread, Florim has no choice but to complete her observation mission and stays to live in the village. She spends her days helping Lasti harvest cabbages in the fields, constantly remaining on edge and trembling with fear whenever Hiraku is anywhere nearby. Florim continues adjusting to her new life in the village, doing her best to help Lasti harvest cabbages in the fields while remaining constantly on edge. Meanwhile, a new minor issue arises when the single slime that Tia originally brought to the village to purify the wastewater starts multiplying at an alarming rate. Before long, there are lots of slimes bouncing around the village in all sorts of different colors, including red, yellow, holy, green, and black variants. Since they are mostly harmless, Hiraku does not really pay much attention to them until one day when a small maroon slime accidentally knocks over a barrel in the storage room and drinks the entire supply of the village's precious alcohol. The alcohol-loving residents, especially Lu, Tia, and the High Elves, are absolutely furious when they discover the empty barrel. They brandish wooden paddles and demand a severe punishment for the creature, angrily suggesting that they execute it or burn it to ashes. Hiraku quickly steps in to calm everyone down, feeling bad for the poor little creature. He suggests they move away from barbaric options and instead go with a short confinement as a punishment. The girls eventually agree with Hiraku that the slime probably would not even reflect on its actions if they punished it, considering it is just a simple monster. Following this realization, the slime is completely acquitted of all charges, and from then on, the slimes are happily allowed to join the villagers during their feasts and celebration. Soon after, the autumn season arrives, bringing cooler weather and a massive harvest of fresh crops, including crisp cabbage, white radishes, carrots, and sweet potatoes. The villagers gather inside the large wooden lodge to enjoy a hearty hot pot meal filled with the newly harvested vegetables and fresh shiitake mushroom. While everyone is eating and praising the delicious food, Hiraku casually mentions that the hot pot would be even better if they had access to seafood. He explains that he really wishes they could get their hands on fish like cod, crabs, and monkfish, along with kombu kelp to make a proper chanko nabe broth. Hearing about these new delicious foods, Lou and the other girls immediately jump on the idea and use their magic screens to start researching the ingredients. They quickly realize that they need access to the ocean to get the seafood. Florum chimes in and notes that Shishido City, a port town located within the boundaries of the demonic kingdom, deals heavily in marine products and would have exactly what they need. Lasty enthusiastically volunteers to fly over there to get the seafood, and Florum offers to accompany her so she can ask a merchant she personally knows for assistance. 3 days later, Lasty and Florum return to the village accompanied by Michael Goron, an elderly man who serves as the president of the largest trading company in Shishido City. Michael proudly presents the fresh marine products his men gathered, including the specific kelp Hiraku requested. He explains that his fishermen normally throw the kelp back into the ocean when they catch it in their nets, but he promises to have his men collect and dry it for the village from now on. Michael then outlines his 3 main goals for visiting the village in person. First, he wants to properly greet Hiraku and thank him for reaching out to do business. Second, he wants to suggest more opportunities for them to trade goods. Third, he formally requests to become the official government purveyor for the village, meaning his company would exclusively handle all their trade with the outside world. He confidently promises that he can get them several times more value for their enticing crops if they allow him to manage their negotiation. Hiraku and the girls agree that having a skilled merchant handle their trade would be incredibly helpful, so they decide to look over his product list and consider his proposition. However, just as Michael tries to bring up trading the village's alcohol, Drime suddenly appears out of nowhere right behind him and fiercely screams that he cannot have the alcohol. Absolutely terrified by the sudden appearance of the massive dragon, Michael immediately excuses himself, pulls out a handkerchief to wipe his sweat, and quickly flies away from the village on the back of a winged lizard man. The narrative then shifts back to 3 days prior in Shishido City to reveal how Michael ended up in this situation. Michael is sitting in his study, complaining about unexpected visitors when his assistant informs him that they specifically requested him by name and brought goods to trade. Michael feels a strange sense of impending danger but decides to meet them anyway. He steps out and is shocked to see Florum, the daughter of the powerful Chrome family, accompanied by Lasty and a pair of muscular lizardmen. Upon realizing that Lasty is the infamous crazy dragon of the demonic kingdom, Michael is completely paralyzed by terror. He internally panics, feeling that the risks of trading with such a dangerous group are way too high. However, when Lasty and Florum pull back the cloths on their baskets to reveal a massive supply of incredibly rare and shiny red apples, Michael's merchant greed instantly takes over. Realizing he can make huge profits, he immediately agrees to find the seafood they need and decides to personally take part in the delivery to the Great Tree Village. During the journey, Lasty offers him a ride, but he ends up being carried through the sky by a winged lizard man, which terrifies him immensely. Upon arriving at the village, his fear only grows as he is greeted by an overwhelming presence of legendary monsters. He spots the giant demon spiders, the inferno wolves, the killer angels, and finally the vampire princess Lou. Despite his intense fear of the terrifying residents, Michael manages to keep a professional smile on his face and successfully negotiates the trade deal with Hiraku. However, Drime's sudden outburst about the alcohol is the final straw that sends him fleeing in sheer terror. Despite the horrifying experience that leaves him trembling and sweating, Michael firmly believes that the massive profits waiting for him will be worth the extreme stress. Back in the present, the villagers finally get to enjoy their authentic seafood hot pot, and Hiraku notes that he should ask Michael for shrimp and squid the next time they trade. Sometime later, another massive white dragon with black horns suddenly attacks the village from the sky. The three angel squad tries to intercept it, but the dragon effortlessly spins them out of the air. Annoyed by the constant dragon attacks, Hiraku decides to handle the situation himself. He grabs his farming tool, transforms it into a wooden spear, and hurls it into the sky with immense force. The spear strikes the white dragon squarely in the head, sending it crashing down into the dense forest. Hiraku heads over to the crash site with his wolves to investigate and finds a white-haired girl, who immediately raises her hands and surrenders. Drime quickly arrives on the scene and introduces the girl as his older sister Hakurin. Hakurin explains that she came to the village because Drime drunkenly told her that Lasti was going to be married off to Hiraku. Hakurin was absolutely furious about this because Lasti is 900 years younger than her and is already finding a husband before she is. Drime desperately tries to clarify that he only made the comment while drinking to ensure the prosperity of their tribe, but Hakurin admits she mostly came to the village just to vent her anger and see what kind of person Hiraku actually is. Hiraku gives her a firm head pat and strictly tells her that she has to clean up the massive mess she made in the forest. Hakurin reluctantly agrees and gets to work moving the fallen logs. After finishing her punishment, Hakurin decides to stay in the village for the time being. She quickly fits in, enjoying the delicious food and imposing on their hospitality. Looking for some entertainment, she suggests they all play a game of mahjong. She challenges Hiraku, Lasti, and Drime to a match and enthusiastically proposes they play strip mahjong so the loser faces true humiliation. Hiraku accidentally agrees to the rules, not wanting to ruin the fun or force anyone to do anything they are uncomfortable with. However, as the game progresses, Hiraku realizes that the dragons are incredibly competitive and absolutely hate losing. He quickly finds himself on a massive losing streak, losing almost all his clothing in the process. He strongly suspects that the dragons are using telekinesis to rewrite the tiles, or using magic to see through the backs of his pieces, but Hakurin proves him wrong by showing that the tiles are completely normal. Eventually, Hiraku gets a lucky draw and realizes he has the chance to score a massive double Yakuman victory. He just needs to pull the right tile to win the entire game. However, when he reaches out and draws his final piece, he gets the north tile, which brings back terrible memories for him. He hesitates for a moment, and Hakurin takes the opportunity to call a winning hand, completely defeating him. Hakurin and the other girls cheerfully clap and chant for him to take his pants off, and a completely humiliated Hiraku accepts his defeat and removes his final piece of clothing. Meanwhile, far away in the demonic kingdom, the demon lord Galgardo sits on his throne complaining to his generals about his daughter going through a rebellious phase. Bezel completely ignores the demon lord's family issues and frantically reports that the ancient dragon Hakurin has now gathered at the Great Tree Village alongside the others. Bezel and Randan panic over the fact that the village now possesses enough military might to conquer their entire country, wondering if they can afford to just sit back and watch. Overwhelmed by the escalating threat and the sheer stress of the situation, Randan abruptly writes a resignation letter, leaves it on his desk, and runs away from the castle. Back in the village, Hakurin tries her best to avoid doing any physical labor. Hiraku tasks her with digging holes and filling them back in just to keep her busy, but she complains constantly and gives up on the very first day. Eventually, they decide to make her the official village teacher. She stands in front of the beastkin children in the classroom and teaches them reading, writing, and mathematics. She explicitly tells the children that she is only training them to work hard so that they can do all of her work for her in the future, proving that her motivation is entirely selfish. Sometime later, a group of 3 Lamia girls arrives at the village and immediately drops to their knees, begging for their lives. Hiraku is confused by their panic, but the Lamia explain that Kuro's pups recently entered a dungeon near their home and completely cleared it out. The sudden invasion of the powerful wolves forced the Lamia to flee their home in terror. Hiraku feels responsible for the trouble his wolves caused and decides to help them out. He agrees to trade the village's fresh crops for the magical blue crystals that the Lamia mined. However, he also kindly requests that they put some clothes on whenever they visit, as they are completely topless, which makes him very uncomfortable. The Lamia gladly agree to the terms and decide to form the Lamia Delivery Service to transport trading goods for the village. With reliable neighbors helping them transport goods and the overall trade increasing significantly, Hiraku decides it is time to expand the village's fields even further. Far away in the demon castle, Princess Yuri inspects a map using a glowing magical orb and concludes that the Great Tree Village is intentionally amassing a dangerous military force. She and her subordinates assume that the village is holding Florum hostage to use against them. Fueled by this misunderstanding, Yuri firmly declares to her guards that they must gather their troops immediately to defeat the village and save Florum. Florum is busy working on accounting paperwork in the village library when Beezle suddenly drops by for a visit. He informs her that Princess Yuri is currently gathering troops and preparing to launch a military campaign. Florum is completely shocked and asks why Yuri would do something so absurd. Beezle explains that during Florum's absence, Yuri's followers filled her head with half-truths, specifically the three politically powerful noble daughters from the Gritch, Boogle, and Mamonrose families. Florum knows Rosalind, Klakasi, and Roaju well and calls them a trio of simpletons. Beezle reveals that the noble girls are actually planning to attack the Great Tree Village. Florum gets frustrated because she has sent plenty of reports to the demonic kingdom, detailing how ridiculously powerful the village is. However, Beezle notes that her reports were so extreme that the nobles likely assumed they were completely unrealistic and ignored them. Beezle tried to get Demon Lord Galgardo to stop the invasion, but Galgardo is far too soft on his daughter to intervene. Florum considers going back to convince them herself, but Beezle warns that they would just view her as an enemy of the kingdom. Instead, he asks her to stop the invasion without mobilizing the village's actual forces. The invading army of 300 men is arriving tomorrow, and Beezle hopes Florum can show them the difference in military might so they just give up and go home. Florum agrees to handle it, knowing that if the village's true forces found out about the attack, it would probably result in the violent destruction of the entire demonic kingdom. The following day, Florum teams up with Tia and Lu to intercept the invading army in the middle of the forest. Tia unleashes a massive beam of blue magic that obliterates the surrounding area, and Lu effortlessly hurls a giant tree trunk right into the middle of the soldiers' path. The overwhelming display of power immediately terrifies the armored knights, and they all raise their hands to surrender while begging for their lives. Lu and Tia are surprised that the battle is over so quickly, and the army even hands over 10 boxes of apples as a desperate apology. After the brief confrontation, Florum brings Rosalind, Klakase, and Roaju back to the village. The three noble girls are completely traumatized by the experience and stand frozen in absolute shock. Florum introduces them to Hiraku, explaining that they are acquaintances from the demonic kingdom who have had a change of heart and want to move to the village. She claims they are ready to work like their lives depend on it. Hiraku is a bit confused by their catatonic state, but Florum privately tells him that if they cause any trouble, he can just dispose of them without hesitation. Hiraku finds her threat scary, but agrees to let them handle the administrative paperwork. Shortly after, Princess Yuri also arrives in the village. Florum introduces her as a friend who just wants to observe the village for a while. She explicitly tells Hiraku not to give Yuri any special treatment and to put her to work until she leaves. Hiraku agrees and tasks Florum with showing the new arrivals around town. Florum then gathers the three noble girls and privately warns them that their past transgressions against the village will be forgiven if they put in honest work. She also advises them to keep their true identities a secret from the other villagers to avoid causing a panic. She then tells Yuri that she will not receive any special treatment and will just be treated as a normal girl named Yuri. Yuri happily accepts this, mentioning that it has been a long time since anyone simply called her by her first name. Florum takes Yuri and the noble girls on a comprehensive tour of the village. The girls are amazed to learn that the local fruits are used to brew alcohol and are shocked to see crops growing directly out of the flooded fields. They also marvel at the large water wheel, amazed that it functions purely on water power rather than magic. As they walk around, Yuri playfully interacts with the beastkin children, while the noble girls are stunned to see so many apples growing on trees, noting that they are considered rare luxury items back in their kingdom. Despite being essentially prisoners, the noble girls secretly whisper to each other about taking over the village, believing it could become the biggest moneymaker for their country. Flowrum overhears their greedy plotting and glares at them, immediately shutting down their conversation. That night, the three noble girls decide they are tired of living in a rural village and plot to escape under the cover of darkness. However, as they sneak out through the forest, they are suddenly confronted by two massive inferno wolves and the giant spider Zabut. The terrifying monsters easily overpower the girls. The next morning, Flowrum finds the three girls lying defeated and completely traumatized. Having thoroughly learned their lesson, the noble girls enthusiastically promise to work hard on their paperwork and never try to escape again. Flowrum is pleased with their new attitude and puts them to work in the town hall, officially naming them the Town Hall Girls. Later, Yuri watches Flowrum casually pet an inferno wolf and play fetch with it. Yuri realizes the sheer absurdity of the village, noting that a single inferno wolf is dangerous enough to destroy an entire city, yet here it acts like a playful pet. She admits to Flowrum that she was ignorant of the outside world and regrets trying to bring war to such a peaceful place. Flowrum agrees, stating that anyone who attacks the village should expect to be roasted by dragon fire. Yuri then gets emotional and scolds Flowrum for suddenly cutting contact with her. She explains that they had been friends since childhood, and she was genuinely worried when she heard Flowrum had become a hostage. Yuri felt abandoned when Flowrum stopped talking to her and started treating her like a stranger. Flowrum apologizes for shutting her out and promises to keep her in the loop from now on. The two girls reconcile and head back to eat together. Over time, the noble girls fully adapt to village life, enjoying the lack of political stress, the delicious food, and the relaxing bath. Yuri also decides to help with the manual labor, completely shocking her noble companions who view farm work as something only commoners do. Yuri ignores their protests and joins the villagers in harvesting persimmons, root vegetables, and golden wheat. After a massive feast of stew and rice, Yuri prepares to return to the demonic kingdom with Bezel. She thanks everyone for their hospitality, and a fox-eared girl gifts her a basket of fresh bread and biscuits made from the wheat they harvested together. Yuri asks the three noble girls if they are coming back with her, but they stubbornly refuse. They claim they still have much to learn in the village and want to repay everyone's kindness through their administrative work. Yuri accepts their decision and teleports away with Bezel. Back at the demon castle, Galgardo sits on his throne and complains to Bezel about Yuri's changing behavior. He notices that since she returned, she has become very dignified and constantly looks busy, completely ignoring his attempts to talk to her. Bezel suggests she is just growing up and taking an interest in politics, but Galgardo completely misunderstands the situation. He assumes Yuri must have met a man and flies into a jealous rage, summoning a massive pillar of dark magic and vowing to tear the boy apart. Bezel calmly tells Galgardo that his overbearing attitude will eventually make Yuri hate him, which shocks the demon lord. Bezel then drags him away to attend a meeting. Meanwhile, the village enjoys a massive autumn harvest, yielding significantly more radishes and crops than they can fit into their storage shelf. Lasti suggests sending the extra food to her father and mother. Hiraku agrees but is completely shocked when he learns that Lasti's grandparents are the legendary Emperor Dragon Doze and the Hurricane Dragon Raymalin. Lasti flies off to deliver the food to Drime first, and then heads to Shishato City to drop off crops for Michael. In Shishato City, Michael asks Lasti to take care of a sea monster that has been attacking his trade vessels. Lasti gladly accepts the request and effortlessly obliterates the giant squid-like monster with a massive magic beam from the sky. She brings some of the monster's meat back to the village, and Hiraku excitedly announces that they will have a seafood hot pot for dinner. At the same time, Hakuren returns from a trip up north with a group of dark-skinned mountain elves led by a girl named Ya. Hiraku welcomes them to the village. Ya explains that food became scarce in their mountain home, so Hakuren invited them to live in the village. Hiraku agrees to take them in and promises to figure out their housing situation. The mountain elves eagerly try to prove their worth by hunting for food, but they end up comedically falling into the village's pit traps alongside the wild rabbits and boars. Ya apologizes for their failure, but Hiraku assures her it is fine and tells them not to push themselves. Ya then tries to make pottery for the village. The clay from the local forest crumbles and vanishes in the kiln. She confidently volunteers to explore the surrounding area to find proper clay, and eventually, she succeeds, creating beautiful and sturdy pottery for the village. Soon after, Ya discovers a new dungeon up north near the mountain. Hiraku sends a survey team of elf girls, a lizard man, and 2 wolves to investigate the area. The team quickly returns and reports finding a dangerous blood viper inside the dungeon. The elf girls become incredibly intense and declare that they absolutely must hunt the monster. They explain to a confused Hiraku that blood viper meat is highly valuable because it boosts vitality, improves marital relations, and blesses couples with children. Hearing this detailed explanation makes Ya blush furiously. Hiraku gets overwhelmed by the elves' intense enthusiasm and says they will discuss hunting it with the rest of the village before winter fully sets in. During this time, the men's bathhouse is finally completed. Hiraku enjoys a relaxing soak in the steamy water with the beastkin children, happy to have a dedicated place for the male villagers and guests like Drime to bathe. Meanwhile, 3 young female attendants are caught by an older maid trying to sneak into the men's bathhouse. They nervously admit that they were hoping to wash Hiraku's back to get closer to him and raise their status in the village. The older maid angrily scolds them, warning that trying to sneak their way to the top will get them severely punished, leaving the 3 girls absolutely terrified. As winter finally approaches, Hiraku visits Lu in her cabin and is shocked to find her bedridden. He is very worried because Lu is usually the one making medicine, and he has never had to care for her before. Lu assures him it is nothing serious, just a slight fever and some nausea. However, she mentions that she has lost her appetite but is still intensely craving sour foods like tomatoes. A fox-eared girl in the room suddenly realizes what is going on. She tells Hiraku that a woman in Howling Village had the exact same symptoms recently. When Hiraku asks what happened to that woman, the fox-eared girl happily explains that the village congratulated her on having a baby. Hiraku yells out in absolute shock as he finally realizes that Lu is pregnant. Following the joyous uproar over Lu's pregnancy, the entire village is in high spirits. Hiraku makes sure to check on Lu every morning to ensure she is doing well, and she assures him not to worry so much. Since she can't transform right now, she takes things easy. Hiraku leaves her to rest and begins his morning routine by checking the medicinal herb garden and the rest of the house. The maids, led by Anne, always wake up earlier than he does, so Hiraku sleeps in a bit later just for their sakes so they can handle their duties without him getting in the way. He meets with the maids to hear any morning reports, like how the wine slime successfully drank the decoy barrel of wine they left out for it. After his rounds, it is time for breakfast. Because the village has grown so large, they have to split breakfast into 3 groups. The first group consists of Hiraku and the main residents. During the meal, he notices Flora looking completely exhausted with dark circles under her eyes. She is sleep-deprived from staying up all night, trying to perfect the miso production, muttering to herself about microorganisms. Hiraku begs her to get some sleep. The second breakfast group is for the maids, and the third is for whoever wakes up late, which usually includes Hakuren. While Hiraku eats, Gran Maria arrives to deliver a security report. She mentions that a group of killer rabbits tried to infiltrate the village, but Kuro and the other wolves quickly eliminated them. Hiraku notes that the rabbits never learn, but since they provide good meat, he doesn't mind their attempts. He also reflects on how Gran Maria and the other angels are incredibly diligent while on guard duty, but the moment they have free time, they become completely lazy and rely on Daga and the lizardmen to do their chores and laundry. After breakfast, Hiraku heads out to work in the massive fields. The farm has expanded significantly, and while there are no normal pests in this world, they have to deal with weird fuzzy black spirits that eat the crops. Fortunately, Zabuton's spider children and the wolves easily spot them, and Hiraku eliminates the pests by using his almighty farming tool as a watering can. He is incredibly proud of the huge harvests they are pulling in, from glossy eggplants to large green beans and gourd. When lunchtime rolls around, Hiraku takes a break to eat the lunch Anne prepared for him. Having a midday meal is actually very rare in this world, and the elves and beastkin were initially terrified that they would eat through the village's food reserves and get kicked out. Hiraku instituted the daily lunch specifically so they would never have to worry about starving as long as they lived in the village. During lunch, Daga approaches to report that the cows have given birth to calves and asks for more feed, which Hiraku approves. Florim also mentions that the crop storage is getting completely full, so Hiraku decides they should talk to the merchant Michael about selling the excess produce. After eating, Hiraku resumes his work. Since the others helped so much with the standard farm work now, he focuses on tilling new fields and growing things that aren't just for food. Using his tool, he creates a beautiful flower bed filled with vibrant yellow tulips and white narcissus to add some color and a sense of civilization to the village. He also spends time crafting small wooden blocks and toys for the beastkin children using his tool. Later in the afternoon, Hiraku joins the villagers for their combat training. Anne and the maids insist on regular practice just in case the village is ever attacked. Everyone participates, from the lizardmen to the angels, and the maids even joke that they need the exercise so they don't get too fat to fit into their uniforms. Hiraku tries practicing with a wooden sword against a training dummy but gets exhausted almost immediately. He then tries throwing a small dagger but fails completely. Figuring he isn't suited for normal weapons, he decides to try his spear. He throws it at a giant rock pillar, and the impact triggers a massive, blinding, magical explosion that obliterates the target. Florum is amazed by the power, but Hiraku realizes he has no idea when he would ever safely use such a destructive attack. As evening approaches, Hiraku finishes his work and heads to the dining hall for dinner. Anne presents a new experimental dish of simmered killer rabbit with a sweet honey sauce. Hiraku admits he is only 20% confident in the recipe, and Lu immediately complains that it is way too sweet. Hiraku nervously asks the maids to only serve dishes they are at least 50% confident in, but Anne sternly refuses, stating they cannot afford to waste any food. Hiraku has no choice but to force the meal down. During dinner, Florum reads a letter from Princess Yuri. Yuri requests to eat more of the village's apples and asks Zabuton to make her another dress. Hiraku feels bad about Yuri making so many demands, but Florum assures him that Zabuton will probably be happy to make the clothes. After dinner, Hiraku heads to the newly built men's bathhouse to relax. He is incredibly glad he forced them to build a separate bathhouse for the men, because he finally has a place to soak in peace without the girls crowding him. However, when he returns to his log cabin and gets into bed, he feels an unsettling presence watching him. He screams for help, and suddenly, 4 elf girls pop out of hidden trapdoors built into the floor, walls, and ceiling of his bedroom. They quickly retreat, and Hiraku realizes they installed the hidden doors to spy on him under the guise of protecting him. He decides he will have the trapdoors sealed up the next day, but despite the lack of privacy, he is still incredibly happy with his new life. The next morning, Hiraku visits the village shake brewery to check on Donovan and the dwarf. Before moving to the village, Hiraku assumed dwarves were just merry drunkards who drank while they worked. Instead, Donovan and his crew are fiercely professional and strictly forbid drinking on the job to avoid any accidents with the furnace. Donovan tests a new batch of clear sake, but immediately rejects it, marking the glass flask with a large black cross. He explains that the booze is bad and only burns the throat, but they won't throw it away. Instead, they plan to redistill it and mix it with fruit juice. Impressed by their dedication, Hiraku asks if they need anything. Donovan requests that Hiraku triple the amount of grapes they harvest, and Hiraku nervously agrees to figure it out. Shortly after, Senna runs up to Hiraku in a panic, completely out of breath. She reports that a strange man has infiltrated the village. Hiraku is shocked because the man somehow managed to slip past Gran Maria's aerial patrols and Zabuton's webs without being noticed. Hiraku rushes to the center of the village and finds a man in a red coat prostrating himself before the wooden shrine containing the statues Hiraku carved. Lu and Flora arrive and casually greet the man as the progenitor. They explain to a confused Hiraku that this man is Vargriff, the progenitor of the vampires, making him essentially their grandfather. Vargriff is thrilled to see Lu and congratulates her on her pregnancy, noting that vampires usually expand their families through blood pacts, so a natural pregnancy is a rare treasure. They all head inside to talk, and Vargriff reveals he is around 4,000 years old. He explains that to keep his sanity over such a long life, he uses magic to erase his memories every couple of hundred years, keeping only the most important details like his name and clan. Hiraku is slightly terrified by the concept, but Vargriff brushes it off with a laugh. Vargriff apologizes for sneaking into the village unannounced. He originally planned to just look around and leave quietly, but he was completely captivated by the wooden statue of God under the great tree. He explains that he actually met God once right after he was born, and God told him to do his best despite being born with the abnormal body of a vampire. Vargriff remembers the encounter, but forgot God's exact appearance due to his memory wiping. When he saw Hiraku's carving, he immediately recognized it as a perfect likeness and instinctively bowed to it. Vargrave desperately wants to take the statue home, but Hiraku explains that it belongs to the village shrine. However, seeing how disappointed the progenitor is, Hiraku offers to carve him a brand new one. Vargrave is overjoyed and happily accepts the offer. Hiraku quickly carves a new wooden statue, and Vargrave loves it just as much as the first. When Vargrave asks how much he owes for the artwork, Hiraku refuses any payment, stating that God is not something that should be sold. Vargrave respects this and promises to think of a different way to show his gratitude. He wishes Lou and Flora good health, straps the massive white-wrapped statue to his back, and leaves the village. Upon returning to his grand temple for the first time in 50 years, Vargrave greets the elderly head priest. He orders the priest to take the temple's beloved centerpiece statue, which was carved by a legendary master sculptor, and replace it with Hiraku's carving. The priest is shocked and hesitant to move their most famous artifact, but Vargrave insists. He also instructs the priest to send word to all the other temples to quietly support and respect Hiraku and the Great Tree Village without disturbing Hiraku's peaceful life. Back in the village, Hiraku suddenly sneezes, wondering if someone is talking about him. Soon after, a massive gift arrives from Vargrave to celebrate Lou's pregnancy. It is an incredibly ornate black and gold grand piano. Hiraku and the lizardmen move the heavy instrument into the dining hall so everyone can enjoy it. The three noble girls from the demonic kingdom, Rosalind, Roaju, and Klakasi, are absolutely stunned when they see it. They recognize it as a priceless piano that is only ever used for major temple ceremonies. Because it is so valuable, the three girls are completely terrified to even touch the keys, fearing that if they break it, their lives will be over. They cry and beg Hiraku to get them a cheap beat-up practice piano instead. Hiraku contacts Michael and successfully procures a standard practice piano for the village. Now that they have a safe instrument to use, a massive piano craze sweeps through the village. Everyone wants to learn how to play. Floram and the three noble girls are the only ones who already know how to play well, but all the other villagers spend every free moment practicing to get better. Hiraku is glad everyone is having fun, but that night he lies awake in bed, staring at the ceiling in frustration because the girls refuse to stop practicing the piano in the middle of the night. Spring finally arrives at the village, bringing stronger sunshine that makes the newly planted vegetables grow brighter and much more colorful. The demi-human girls are busy tending to the lush eggplant, cucumber, and tomato gardens when Hiraku calls out to everyone that it is time for a lunch break. The girls eagerly gather around the picnic blankets, completely famished after their hard work in the field. Hiraku sits down with Lou, who is now heavily pregnant, and she uses her ice magic to cool down her red drink. Hiraku worries about her walking around and pushing herself too hard, but Lou assures him that getting some exercise is actually very good for her condition. She explains that the other girls in the village, especially the beastkin and the ogre maids who have given birth before, have been teaching her all about reproduction and maintaining a strong body. Lou admits that she initially knew nothing about pregnancy, but the constant support from the experienced maids has been incredibly reassuring to her. The other girls joke about how heavy her belly must be right now, comparing it to the weight of 2 large cabbages. Lou happily notes that her appetite has fully returned, but she complains about the one thing that truly bothers her right now. She is absolutely devastated that she cannot drink any alcohol while she is pregnant. In a show of solidarity, Tia and several of the other girls decide to completely swear off alcohol until Lou can drink again, but this self-imposed ban quickly takes a severe toll on them. Gran Maria and the other Angel Knights soon approach Hiraku with a desperate plea to intervene. They explain that Tia and the others have become completely dejected and miserable without their drinks, and the knights beg Hiraku to sell off all the alcohol in the village just to remove the source of their suffering. They explain that every time the girls eat, they are tormented by how perfectly a drink would pair with their meal. Hiraku calms them down and firmly refuses to sell the alcohol. He explains that making sake takes a massive amount of time and effort, and they would definitely regret getting rid of it all later. Instead, he tells them that alcohol actually tastes much better the longer it is allowed to age in the barrels. He encourages them to tough it out for now and look forward to drinking the perfectly aged sake once Lou's pregnancy is over. Meanwhile, Donovan and the dwarves are sitting outside their brewery looking completely depressed about the situation. Donovan asks Hiraku if they did something wrong, noting that everyone in the village suddenly stopped drinking their alcohol. Hiraku quickly apologizes for not explaining the situation sooner and reveals that the girls are just abstaining out of solidarity with Lu, not because the booze tastes bad. Relieved to hear that their brewing skills aren't the problem, Donovan and his crew immediately cheer up. Hiraku suggests they should ramp up production because everyone will definitely want to drink even more to make up for lost time, and Donovan enthusiastically agrees to meet their high expectations. As Lu's due date approaches, she spends more time resting inside her cabin to avoid the exceptionally strong sun outside. The villagers constantly drop by to check on her and bring her special gifts to help with the pregnancy. Tia and the angels bring a magical white flower from a snowy mountain that constantly releases cold air to keep the room comfortably cool for her. Ya, the mountain elf leader, presents a glass jar filled with secret medicinal herbs meant to bring good health and vigor, insisting that it is much better to use them now than to leave them sitting in storage forever. Lasty drops by with a magically glowing blue gem necklace from her father's treasure room that specifically helps with magic recovery. Anne prepares a large custard pudding topped with caramel sauce, while Hakurin gifts her a decorative floral wreath to serve as a good luck charm. Flora even makes a special tomato and tofu miso soup that Lu finds surprisingly delicious despite the unusual ingredients. Daga, the lizardman representative, feels completely out of his element since his species hatches from eggs, but he eagerly offers Lu his blood to drink so she can grow stronger. Lu politely declines the offer, joking that her teeth could never pierce his incredibly tough scales. As evening sets in, Hiraku and Lu sit together in their cabin, admiring all the wonderful gifts arranged on a nearby table. Hiraku spots a wooden mallet tied with a white ribbon and asks what it is for. Lu explains that Donovan gave it to her, promising it would definitely come in handy later. Hiraku is completely confused, wondering why anyone would ever need a wooden mallet for childbirth. Suddenly, Lu clutches her stomach as the intense labor pains begin. The maids instantly spring into action, boiling water, preparing fresh towels, and rushing around the lodge to get everything ready for the delivery. Senna stays right by Lu's side, holding her hand as she pushes through the agonizing pain. Hiraku is forced to wait outside, feeling completely useless and incredibly anxious about the whole ordeal. He paces back and forth, staring out at the twin moons in the night sky and visiting the small wooden shrine to pray. He reflects on his journey, remembering how he originally wanted to live completely alone in the forest, but now finds himself surrounded by a massive, loving family. He spends the entire night in a nervous panic until morning finally breaks. Sina and Anne emerge from the room with massive smiles, announcing that the delivery was a complete success and both mother and child are doing perfectly well. Hiraku is stunned and cautiously enters the room to find Lu resting on the bed, gently holding a newborn baby boy wrapped in a white cloth. Lu smiles and invites Hiraku to hold him. Carefully supporting the baby's neck as instructed by the maids, Hiraku takes his newborn son in his arms. He is amazed by how warm and heavy the tiny baby feels. When the baby smiles at him, Hiraku is overwhelmed with pure emotion. Lu reveals that she wants to name the boy Alfred, and Hiraku completely agrees. Looking down at his son, Hiraku remembers the severe illness that constantly plagued his past life and vows to raise Alfred to be strong so he never has to suffer through anything like that. Lu agrees, promising that they will raise him to be strong together. A week passes and Hiraku is back to working in the fields, admiring his thriving crops. He notes that despite being half vampire, Alfred looks like a completely normal human baby right now. Looking around the massive settlement, Hiraku realizes just how much the village has expanded from a single solitary camp into a bustling home with multiple buildings and endless fields. Now that he is officially a father, he decides he needs to do something special to thank all the villagers for their endless hard work in building up the community over the past year. He gathers the village representatives inside the lodge and introduces a brand new system using silver reward medals engraved with a tree emblem. He explains that these medals will act as the village's first official currency. Up until now, Hiraku has been personally distributing all the crops, hunted meat, and traded goods to everyone whenever they asked for something. But with the village population growing so incredibly large, handling all the transactions on his own has become absolutely impossible. The girls suggest simply trading goods directly with each other, but Hiraku points out that everyone values items differently, making direct bartering far too complicated. He explains that the medals will provide a standard value for all future transactions. However, to avoid total economic chaos, he decides to introduce them slowly just as reward vouchers for the time being. He starts by giving every villager 3 medals each, while granting 30 medals to the leaders of the wolf packs and spider families to distribute among their kin. Hiraku quickly finds himself overwhelmed with work because he has to handcraft every single medal himself, using his magical tools to ensure they cannot be counterfeited by anyone. The villagers react to the new currency in various different ways. The dwarves immediately spend all their medals on wine, while others purchase weapons that Drime previously brought, or just use the shiny silver coins as room decoration. However, many villagers start using their medals to order custom-made furniture and toys, forcing Hiraku to spend his days frantically chopping wood and fulfilling massive carpentry orders. The system hits a slight snag when Senna approaches Hiraku, begging to trade her medals for a baby. Hiraku is shocked and firmly explains that babies are absolutely not for sale, no matter how many medals she offers him. They eventually compromise, allowing the villagers to use their medals to rent the mayor for a day of personal assistance instead. Sometime later, the village finally throws a massive evening feast to officially celebrate Alfred's birth. Everyone gathers around the central tree, enjoying a huge banquet illuminated by a glowing bonfire. Hiraku apologizes to Lou for making everyone wait so long for the party, but she notes that everyone seems to be having a wonderful time eating and drinking. Hiraku watches the villagers drink heavily and worries they might overdo it. Suddenly, Donovan approaches the stage with the giant wooden barrel of special wine he promised to age. He instructs Hiraku and Lou to use the wooden mallet he gifted them earlier. Realizing what the mallet is actually for, Hiraku and Lou swing it together, cracking open the top of the barrel in a festive spray of dark red wine. The crowd cheers wildly and the drinking truly begins. Hiraku mentions how great it feels to do something so traditional and festive to celebrate. However, when Donovan offers them a drink, Lou sadly reminds him that she still cannot consume alcohol while breastfeeding. Hiraku decides he will just enjoy watching everyone else's smiling faces instead of drinking himself. Donovan then suggests a brilliant idea to solve the problem. Instead of letting the drunk villagers finish the entire special barrel tonight, they should bottle the rest of the wine and age it safely until Alfred is old enough to drink it himself. Hiraku and Lou absolutely love the idea of sharing a drink with their grown son in the future. Donovan frantically orders the other dwarves to start bottling the wine immediately before the rowdy crowd drains it all. Meanwhile, Flora is completely enamored with baby Alfred, cuddling him tightly and claiming that he wants to be her baby, prompting Hiraku to quickly intervene and tell her to back off. Word of Alfred's safe birth eventually reaches the demonic kingdom. Inside their grand meeting hall, Demon Lord Galgardo and his generals discuss the news. Realizing how powerful and prosperous the Great Tree Village has become, they completely abandon any lingering thoughts of ever challenging them in combat. Instead, they focus entirely on maintaining a peaceful relationship. One of the generals suggests marrying someone off to the village to secure a permanent alliance, but Galgardo furiously slams his hands on the table, aggressively refusing to ever hand over his precious daughter Yuri to anyone. Meanwhile, Michael the merchant prepares a massive shipment of gifts to send to the village, ensuring their highly profitable business relationship remains perfectly intact. Back at the Great Tree Village, Tia and her angels approach Hiraku with an important matter regarding new arrival. They explain that Drime and the demonic kingdom have informed them about a large group of refugees who were recently driven out of their homes by a violent war with the Fullheart Kingdom. Over 100 people are currently looking for a safe place to live. Realizing that their current settlement cannot handle that many new arrivals all at once, Hiraku immediately decides to build an entire second village to accommodate them. The female adventurers eagerly pledge their full support, stating that since the village saved them when they were in need, they absolutely cannot ignore others seeking refuge. Hiraku calls a meeting to start planning the logistics and gathering supplies for the immediate construction of Great Tree Village 2. Realizing that a massive wave of over 100 immigrants is on the way, the villagers quickly shift their entire focus to preparation. The demi-human girls immediately get to work harvesting massive amounts of eggplants, cucumbers, and tomatoes from the fields, prioritizing the creation of preserved foods to handle the incoming population spike. The maids also pitch in, preparing fresh pita bread sandwiches stuffed with vegetables to hand out as easy work lunches for everyone laboring outside. Hiraku knows their current settlement cannot handle that many people, so he gathers the leaders and decides they must build a completely new village just for the immigrants. While the physical laborers are ready to build, the administrative side of the village is completely falling apart. Inside the village office, the civil servant girls Kurakasi, Rawaj, and Rosalind are buried under towering mountains of parchment, looking completely exhausted and physically sick from trying to keep track of all the multiplying supplies. Seeing their desperate situation, Florim steps in and brings a large group of reinforcements directly from the Demon Kingdom. These new girls are students wearing matching uniforms, and Florim explains that helping out with village administration will give them an edge in high society. The new girls are initially overwhelmed, especially when a magical mishap causes one of their documents to burst into smoke. But they quickly get excited when they hear rumors about all-you-can-eat apples and the chance to pet the village's giant spiders and wolves. With the extra administrative help secured, the physical planning begins. Gran Maria flies ahead to scout the surrounding forest and reports back that the area is completely clear of danger. Hiraku takes a pink-haired elf to survey a potential site downstream. They strategically decide to build the new village on the opposite side of the river, placing it at a distance just in case the new immigrants ever decide to start a rebellion and need to be defended against. They find a perfect clearing near a massive distinctive tree and get straight to work. An elf girl and the lizardman Daga try to chop down the incredibly thick timber in the area, but the wood is harder than iron. The elf's magic dagger and the lizardman's heavy axe bounce right off the bark without leaving a scratch. Seeing their struggle, Hiraku steps up and manifests his omnipotent farming tool in the form of a glowing axe. With a single powerful swing, he effortlessly slices through the massive trunks, leaving the others completely stunned by his incredible strength. Hiraku continues clearing the land at a rapid pace, quickly building a wooden bridge across the river to allow for easy crossing. He doesn't stop there, constructing a canal from upstream, a large reservoir, and a dedicated material processing site to handle all the newly chopped lumber. He works so relentlessly that he eventually takes a break to carve a highly detailed wooden statue of Zabuton. Lu soon approaches him while carrying baby Alfred and gently scolds him for overworking, forcing Hiraku to finally take some well-deserved time to rest. Once the materials are prepped, the entire village collaborates to assemble the houses based on pre-drawn blueprints. The process is incredibly fast, with the elf girls using green magic to easily lift entire wooden walls and roof beams into place, while the lizardmen hammer the supports with heavy mallets. The maids constantly walk through the construction site, serving hot bowls of soup to keep the workers energized. The only minor issue occurs when a dark-skinned elf girl casually tosses a heavy wooden board to another elf standing on a roof, prompting Hiraku to immediately establish a strict safety rule against throwing lumber. Thanks to everyone's hard work, a pristine settlement of wooden log cabins is quickly finished. However, before they can even celebrate, Drime suddenly teleports into the village in a massive panic. He apologizes for the lack of warning, explaining that the situation with the refugees escalated much faster than he expected, and he ended up flying faster than his own messenger wyvern. He introduces the first batch of aspiring immigrants, a group of 72 minotaurs led by a massive man named Gordon. Hiraku is completely caught off guard by Gordon's towering 2-meter height, but quickly welcomes the exhausted group and has the maids serve them warm bowls of porridge. Since Hiraku admits he knows absolutely nothing about Minotaur diets or habits, the lizardman Nerf steps forward to help. Nerf explains that he used to live near Minotaurs in his old mountain village, and offers to gather their opinions and translate their needs. Hiraku confidently leads the Minotaurs to the newly built village, but they immediately run into a massive, undeniable problem. The standard-sized log cabins they just spent days building are way too small and cramped for the giant Minotaurs to fit inside comfortably. Realizing the Minotaurs simply cannot live in the tiny houses, Hiraku is forced to temporarily house all 72 of them inside the village's main large wooden lodge, which quickly becomes incredibly crowded. The situation gets even more chaotic when Beazle suddenly contacts Florim to announce that he is bringing in another large group of refugees. Beazle arrives looking completely exhausted, having used continuous teleportation magic to evacuate a group of centaurs from the war zone. The centaurs are half human and half horse, and their leader, a brown-haired woman named Grewald, steps forward with a highly arrogant attitude. She introduces herself as a relative of the senior steward of the Viscount Beeg family and demands that Hiraku respond appropriately to her noble status. Hiraku is completely clueless about aristocratic rankings in the Demon Kingdom and feels intimidated by her haughty demeanor. Grewald grows increasingly frustrated by his lack of a formal response, loudly complaining that her people are tired and demanding that someone do something to accommodate them immediately. Before the situation can escalate any further, Lashashi Droy, one of the blonde civil servant girls, calmly steps forward. She politely introduces herself as the second daughter of Count Droy, a rank that vastly overpowers Grewald's minor connection to a mere viscount. Realizing she just insulted and yelled in the presence of a high-ranking noble, Grewald completely panics and immediately drops her horse body to the dirt in a desperate groveling apology, begging for mercy. Lashashi smoothly takes charge of the centaur group, offering to handle their logistics and put them in their place. However, when they lead the 100 centaurs to the new village, they run into the exact same problem as before. The houses are far too small to accommodate their massive equine bodies. The centaurs ask if Hiraku can just use magic to shrink them down, but he explains that only someone like Lu has that specific shrinking ability. With no other options, Hiraku scrambles for a backup plan and ends up temporarily renting out the village's spacious cowsheds to house the centaurs, while suggesting that some of them could stay with the Lamias in the southern dungeon. Just as Hiraku thinks they have no more room to spare, a group of Lamias arrive from the forest carrying several small tree stumps. They explain that they found these stumps just wandering around the dangerous woods and decided to bring them in. Suddenly, the stumps transform into young women with green hair and white dresses. Their representative, Igu, introduces her people as the Nunu Daphne, a unique race of tree spirits. She explains that they possess the ability to blend in with plants, so whenever they encountered a monster in the forest, they would transform into stumps and wait for it to pass, which made their journey incredibly slow. Igu reveals that their hometown was destroyed by severe flooding because the locals cut down too many trees. They originally heard about the Great Tree Village from Michael the Merchant and decided to travel all the way across the Death Forest because they heard the soil here is exceptionally good. Assuming they must be starving after such a long and dangerous journey, Hiraku immediately offers to throw a huge banquet for them and fetch them some fresh fruit. However, Igu politely declines the offer, explaining that her species doesn't actually eat regular food. Instead, they only require clean water, bright sunlight, and highly nutritious dirt. To prove her point, one of the Daphne walks over to a freshly tilled farming field, turns back into a smiling tree stump, and happily sprouts a white flower to soak up the nutrients from the dark earth. Realizing how incredibly low maintenance they are, Hiraku enthusiastically offers to show them to their new houses. He promises to modify the cabins by making the windows extra large so they can get plenty of sunlight indoors. Igu firmly rejects the idea, stating that her people strongly prefer to stay entirely outdoors so they can fully experience the rain and natural weather elements. Without waiting for further instruction, all the Daphne happily plant themselves as tree stumps right in the middle of the open dirt field. Night eventually falls over the settlement, highlighting the completely ridiculous reality of their current situation. Despite spending days frantically clearing land, cutting timber, and assembling an entire new settlement, every single one of the newly constructed wooden houses sits completely empty in the moonlit forest. The giant minotaurs are crammed inside the main lodge, the centaurs are sleeping on hay in the cowsheds, and the tree spirits are literally just sitting outside in the dirt fields. Inside the packed main lodge, the civil servant girls and the rest of the village leaders gather around a large table, looking completely and utterly exhausted. One of the elf girls lies face down on the floor in a comical display of fatigue. Realizing they have absolutely no other choice, they force themselves to sit up and immediately start drawing up new blueprints. They agree that they must construct massive, custom-built houses that can actually fit the 72 minotaurs and 100 centaurs properly, mentally preparing themselves for another grueling and massive round of non-stop construction. Hiraku immediately apologizes to the assembled representatives for the lack of suitable housing and asks for their patience while he figures out a long-term solution. To manage the massive influx of immigrants, he assigns specific caretakers from the village to help each group settle in. Narf, the muscular lizard man, is assigned to look after the towering minotaurs. Lashashi Droy, one of the capable civil servant girls, is tasked with assisting the centaurs. For the new Daphne, a beast woman named Mam is chosen as their guide, and while she is incredibly nervous about the responsibility, she remains determined to do her best. With the representatives sorted out, Hiraku explains that the main village was originally designed for human-sized residents, making it completely inadequate for the newcomers. To solve this logistical nightmare, he plans to build two entirely separate settlements, temporarily dubbed Village 2 and Village 3, in locations previously scouted by Leah and the other High Elves. This setup will give the Minotaurs and Centaurs environments perfectly suited to their unique physical needs, while still keeping them connected to the main community. He asks everyone to help clear the surrounding forest and build roads to these new sites. However, the excavation process quickly gets out of hand when the powerful dragons Hakaran and Lasti volunteer to help. Instead of using standard hand tools to clear the brush, the dragons resort to blasting the forest away with massive beams of magical energy. Hakaran effortlessly vaporizes thick trees with a single powerful kick, while Lasti punches a massive laser straight through the woods, obliterating everything in her path. Hiraku immediately starts panicking, worried that they might accidentally destroy the entire forest of death if they keep going at this reckless rate. He quickly steps in and tells everyone to relax, instructing the overzealous dragons to hold back their full power and just follow the riverbank to map out the roads safely. Once the path is properly cleared without blowing up the landscape, the actual construction begins. Elves, horned men, and lizard men work together alongside Hiraku, stacking heavy logs and moving earth to quickly raise the new buildings. While the intense physical labor continues outside, life inside the main village remains lively. Baby Alfred receives a bunch of new gifts, including custom-made clothes woven by Zabaton. The tiny outfits are a bit too large for the infant, showing how eager the giant spider is for him to grow up. Meanwhile, the maids keep Alfred entertained, using secret peekaboo techniques that leave Lou curious about how they manage to make the baby laugh so easily. In Village 2, the architecture is specifically tailored for the towering minotaurs. Hiraku constructs taller one-story homes with massive entryways. The furniture inside is equally gigantic. A wooden chair is so large that Hiraku initially mistakes it for a dining table, and the massive beds are custom built with special slots in the headboards, so the minotaurs can sleep comfortably without their horns getting in the way. Over in Village 3, the centaurs receive homes built more like high-end stables, designed to accommodate their horse-like lower bodies. The buildings feature incredibly wide entrances without standard doors. Since centaurs struggle with turning regular door handles, Hiraku installs large curtains drawn by simple ropes and heavy sliding panels for rainy days. A month flies by, and the two new villages are fully constructed just before the harsh winter sets in. Back at the main lodge, Hiraku sits down with the administrative team to officially name the settlement. He throws out a few fancy ideas like Upton, Middleton, and Downton, but eventually suggests sticking with Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3 to keep things organized. The civil servant girls immediately agree and beg him not to change the names, completely traumatized by the thought of having to rewrite every single administrative document and map they just finished organizing. With the names settled, they move on to assigning leadership. Gordon is named the mayor of Village 2, and Grewald is appointed the mayor of Village 3. Since these new mayors now share the same title as Hiraku, the girls suggest upgrading his title to High Mayor, Great Mayor, or even King Mayor to establish a clear hierarchy. Hiraku cringes at the grandiose titles and firmly rejects the idea, preferring to keep his simple village chief status. Amidst the planning, the new Daphne representative Igu wonders when her people will get their own village. Hiraku awkwardly explains that they decided against building a dedicated settlement for the tree spirit, since the new Daphne prefer to stay rooted in one spot and can communicate via telepathy. Hiraku assigns them a special role. He asks them to scatter around key locations in the forest to act as a communication network and an early warning system. At night, their magical glowing properties will serve as natural streetlights for the roads. The Daphne are thrilled with this task and even agree to keep an eye on the uninhabited Village 1 to ensure it doesn't fall into ruin. One of the maids later approaches a Daphne disguised as a stump to ask if she needs anything, and the stump simply remarks that the sky is blue before magically transforming into a girl, proving how deeply connected they are to nature. With everyone physically settled, a massive new problem quickly emerges regarding the food supply. Hiraku originally planned for the new villages to hunt in the forest to sustain themselves, but he quickly realizes this is completely impossible. The Minotaurs are a peaceful people not suited for fast-paced combat, and the Centaurs are mostly refugees lacking actual hunting experience. The Forest of Death is simply too dangerous for them, filled with deadly creatures like the giant fanged rabbits. Hiraku realizes that the only reason hunting seemed so easy before was because the incredibly powerful Inferno wolves and Zabaton's giant spiders were handling all the violent encounters for them. To keep the newcomers safe, Hiraku decides to strictly ban them from hunting in the forest and assigns Kuro's pack and the spiders to take over the village defenses entirely. Since hunting is out of the question, Hiraku shifts the focus to agriculture, hoping the villages can become self-sufficient through farming alone. However, when the Minotaurs and Centaurs try to plant crops in the newly tilled fields, nothing takes root. Hiraku is confused and asks when they usually plant these seeds, only to realize he has absolutely no idea how normal farming actually works. Up until now, he relied entirely on his almighty farming tool, which magically fertilized the soil, instantly planted whatever he imagined, and made crops grow rapidly regardless of the season or weather. Without his magic tool doing all the heavy lifting, the harsh reality of traditional farming hits them hard. Fortunately, Gordon steps up to save the day. It turns out the large Minotaur has actual farming experience from his old village. Everyone immediately starts calling him Gordon Senpai in deep admiration. He guides them to lay down thick layers of straw to keep the soil warm and advises them to plant winter wheat, which will sit under the snow and be ready for harvest by summer. Hiraku is humbled by the realization that normal crops take half a year to grow, noting that his magical tool has completely spoiled him and left him ignorant of real agricultural struggles. In a show of gratitude for their continued survival and good fortune, Hiraku uses his tool to carve two intricate wooden statues depicting the god of creation and the god of agriculture, enshrining them in the village to watch over their newly planted field. While the Minotaurs handle the heavy agricultural work, the Centaurs utilize their incredible speed and stamina to establish a dedicated delivery service. They transport goods, materials, and supplies between the three villages, pulling heavy wooden carts at breakneck speeds through the forest. While they are highly efficient, their competitive nature sometimes gets the better of them. Two Centaurs push themselves too hard trying to set a new route record, leading to a spectacular crash that sends their cart flying and scatters crates, barrels, and a poor slime across the dirt. Hiraku just hopes they start prioritizing safety over speed in the future. Watching the Centaurs gallop around the village makes Hiraku want to experience horseback riding for himself. He recently acquired a regular horse from Michael the merchant, but the stubborn animal completely ignores his commands and refuses to let him mount. Hoping for a solution, he asks Grewald if she can communicate with the horse to convince it to let him ride. Grewald politely informs him that she does not speak horse, but she happily offers to let him ride her own dark horse instead. Hiraku climbs on, holding on to Grewald's shoulders as they trot through the forest. The ride starts peacefully, but the regular black horse gets incredibly jealous watching them. It suddenly charges forward with a terrifying look in its eyes, sparking a high-speed, bumpy race through the woods. The next day, the stubborn black horse approaches Hiraku, entirely changing its attitude. It nudges him affectionately, finally allowing him to mount and ride. Hiraku takes it for a spin around the field, praising the animal for finally cooperating. However, Grewald spots them from behind a cabin and becomes absolutely furious, realizing that the horse that just let him ride is actually her personal horse. She storms over, shouting about the betrayal. In her frustration, she demands that Hiraku ride on her centaur back instead, claiming the regular horse is a dangerous wild beast. Hiraku frantically tries to calm her down, completely overwhelmed by the bizarre jealousy between him, a centaur, and a horse. To settle the dispute, he promises to take turns riding both horses every other day to keep things fair. Later, Hiraku takes a well-deserved break under a large tree with Lou and baby Alfred. Watching the village operate smoothly, he confesses his lingering anxieties. He worries about the future and what might happen if he suddenly falls ill, realizing how much the entire community relies on the overwhelming convenience of his almighty farming tool. If he goes down, the entire food supply could collapse. Lu gently dismisses his concerns, telling him to just relax since he won't be retiring anytime soon anyway, and they can deal with illnesses if they ever actually happen. Hiraku agrees, feeling slightly better as he plays with Alfred and lifts the laughing baby into the air. However, while reflecting on the future of the settlement, Hiraku remembers another pressing issue that the new immigrants were supposed to solve. The Great Tree Village has a massive demographic imbalance, as it is completely overflowing with women, and has hardly any men. Hiraku had originally hoped the newcomers would balance the ratio and provide future husbands for the girls, but the reality is incredibly disappointing. Out of the Minotaurs, 28 are male. But Gordon explains that Minotaurs strictly marry within their own race due to their massive size, meaning they won't intermingle with the other villagers. That leaves the Centaurs as the only option. Hiraku approaches Grewald to inquire about the 30 male Centaurs, but she reveals that all the adult males are currently off fighting in the war, leaving only young boys behind in the village. Desperate for a solution to the population crisis, Hiraku carefully asks Grewald if Centaurs ever marry outside their race. She admits it is highly uncommon and presents a difficult hurdle for them. However, completely misinterpreting Hiraku's political inquiries, Grewald assumes he is demanding a centaur bride as a price for allowing them to live in the village. Her eyes light up with intense dedication, and she boldly declares that she is single and fully prepared to serve him as his wife. Hiraku goes into a complete panic, waving his hands defensively and insisting that he is not demanding anything of the sort. Grewald gets flustered, confused as to why he would reject her, and questions if men don't enjoy overpowering strong women. Hiraku tries his absolute best to calm the enthusiastic centaur down, desperately hoping the centaurs will just manage to thrive among themselves so he doesn't have to deal with any more complicated marriage politics. That's it for this video. Remember to like and subscribe for the next part. Thanks for watching.